All right, welcome everybody to Game of Thrones discussions from the perspective of people who have read the books. We've read all five of the Song of Ice and Fire series books already written, and we're up to date on the TV show. And currently, we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 5, which was entitled First of His Name. And my name's James Johnson, and that's my mama LaDonna you see in that second one. Say hi, mama.
Hello, folks, and welcome.
And this is Charlie in Westeros.
Hello, folks. Yes, my name is Charlie in Westeros, and
That plug.
here it goes. If you have not read the books, or if you don't want anything spoiled for you from the series of Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones as a whole, then you can check out my spoiler-free reviews at youtube.com/CharlieInWesteros.
I should definitely do that. Maester Payne, hit it.
I am Maester Payne, Payne, and that's about it for me.
Check out his YouTube channel, too.
Yes.
Maester has a few good videos out there.
It'll be...
And I plan to do more when I ever get around to it.
and a link to his channel will be in the description, at least when
Oh,
we're
thank you, guys.
not live. And we should mention Tony Teflon. A lot of people have suggested us getting Tony Teflon involved. We would love to get Tony Teflon involved, but there's 4 people. There should be 5, actually. Eli Knight was with us, and he's having an issue, but he should join us at any moment. It's getting to be a lot of people, and the more people we have, the more difficult the discussion is to maintain. But at one point, we'd love to have Tony. We have not even asked him yet, because I'm scared that once I ask him, we'll have to deal with being like, not yet, Tony. Not yet, Tony. So I'd love to have him. But, all right, thanks to Charlie, who's going to be our wonderful host this time.
Yeah. So shall I just take it away, folks?
Please do.
How about
Alrighty, so I guess we could start off by discussing the episode. Oh, and by the way, I will go about this by location. So if you have any objections to that method, by all means, voice it now. It's just easier, I think. So I guess we'll start off in King's Landing. The first scene we have is Tommen Baratheon, I guess that's his name, his crowning ceremony. We have Cersei and Marjorie, who actually talk in a very friendly manner for a change about Joffrey's, his innate nature, and how apparently even Cersei was very afraid of him, and she's not afraid of many people. And how Tommen may be a truly deserving king for a change. That was the very first scene. I don't know if anyone had any immediate thoughts on that. Although I will say one quick thing, and this is a bit of a foreshadowing for the TV show, is when at the point where the Septa says, "Long may he reign," about Tommen, of course, we then hear Tywin specifically repeating, "Long may he reign," louder than the rest of the crowd, and the camera actually pans in on him specifically. So I think that's a little foreshadowing to the fate that awaits our dear Hand of the King, Tywin Lannister. So, anybody have any thoughts on this specific scene?
I do. I can cut in.
Yes, go for it.
I don't know why, but for some reason, when it "Long may he reign" and it cuts to the crowd and everybody says it all together and everybody claps, there's one person not clapping, Cersei. And I'm not sure why she's not clapping, but even Tywin's clapping. Cersei's not clapping. And I don't really know what to make out of that. Maybe she's the Queen Regent. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Ideal.
But in the situation where Cersei and Marjorie are talking, that is not being kind. I know it appears to be kind, but it's not. I mean, we're all aware of it. That is subtext, complete subtext throughout the entire conversation, and to me, Cersei is the first one to say anything. She says he was a monster. You know what he would have been, and he would have been your monster. But when Marjorie says something about him, Cersei kind of has to bite her tongue. Really, like, it was subtle, and I didn't notice it the first time I watched the episode, but she really had to bite her tongue. And then Marjorie says the sister comment, which was enough of a bite, and we get a pause for us to remember, oh yeah, Cersei, did she kill her in her sleep if she ever said that again? And then she calls her mother, which I'm sure was not pleasant in Cersei's mind.
That's a great comment, James. I agree. Maester Payne, you want to step in, or can I go?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I think
Okay, first of all, James is absolutely right. Everybody claps, not Cersei. I think that is partly because, even though her son is stepping up, she may lose another child. There's a grave danger in case somebody doesn't like. The other thing I wanted to say is that I thought it was pretty heartfelt that everybody in the court wanted Tommen to be king over Joffrey, because it seemed like a pretty heartfelt clapping by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, everybody kind of likes Tommen. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this is a nod to what happens later on with Bran, but I don't think she says "you're a monster," does she, James? I think she says "nightmare."
Your nightmare, that's what she says.
Okay, well, I think that she doesn't say "you're a monster" because I think it is an echo or a mirroring to when Cold Hand says "you're monster, Brandon Stark."
Right.
So I think there was some mirroring there going on, and of course, "you're a monster, Brandon Stark" could potentially mean the Night's King, and I think nightmare means something like Night's King. So maybe I'm stretching, but I think there might be something there. And of course, it was absolute context, and of course, Cersei is manipulating the heck out of the situation, and she doesn't like Marjorie, but I think she accepts the fact she's going to marry. But also, she knows she better get in bed with Marjorie because she's going to go back to Mace Tyrell and could impact the trial of Tyrion.
Cersei, she is also grieving, right?
True.
You can't cheer one son. I mean, it's kind of...
Yeah, I agree with Maester Payne on this one. I felt that the reason why she didn't clap, and she even says it in her conversation with Marjorie, is that even though she knew the kind of nightmare that Joffrey was, he was still her firstborn son, and you don't like any of the others, as she says, as much as you do your firstborn. At least according to Cersei. Whether that's true or not, we won't get into that. I also think she didn't clap because, and maybe this wasn't necessarily the case, but I felt that maybe it was a small nod towards, the kind of plotting she's doing. She's not going to be vocal in this episode because there's a lot going on in her mind right now in terms of how she wants to work out the trial with Tyrion. I think she's more focused on vengeance than worrying about her new son as king, or her second son as king.
To add a little bit to what you just said, they are certainly playing Cersei's political abilities in this episode, and it's a combination of she lost Joffrey, which was her central power point. She's realizing that Jaime's not quite as manipulatable as she thought before he comes back, and so she may feel like she is her only source of power now, and she talks to Tywin in this. She talks to Oberyn. She talks to Marjorie in this. She's getting her fingers in as many pies as she can.
I agree.
That's the three judges, basically, though, right?
Who's the...
More or less. It was Mace Tyrell.
Yes, but she says, go talk to your father about this. So.
You're right.
Yeah.
You were right.
That's why I said it, because she's manipulating Marjorie. She's there with the Tyrells doing that. Go ahead.
Okay, I had one quick thought on that scene, and maybe this is me being a little bit hopeful, but I was kind of hoping to see more of or a little more foreshadowing in terms of, the kind of conflict that will come between Cersei and Marjorie later on, something that's going to be really big in the fourth book, or whenever they choose to address those events that take place in the fourth book between Marjorie and Cersei. And I guess they did to a degree, but maybe I would have just liked to see it played up even more. I don't know what you guys thought of that.
Charlie, I think that you're right, but I also remember in the books, Marjorie doesn't go ballistic on Cersei until Cersei's in her cell at the end.
Very true.
Cersei kind of pulls a Liza thing where she acts so nice in the beginning, and then you start seeing the manipulation, and Marjorie calls her a wicked, vile bitch or something. So I think they're building to that, and I don't think it would have been the appropriate time to go off on each other.
Good point. I don't know if anybody had any more thoughts on this specific scene, because I wanted to just address the episode title quickly, because I forgot to do that. I don't know if you guys are okay with that or not.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so James, you mentioned that the title is first of his name, and of course this does refer to Tommen and his coronation, but and I mentioned this in my own review, and I think this is important to bring it up again because I want to hear what you guys think of this. I also felt that it was a bit of a reminder of, I guess, the first things that happened in the series. You know, this is episode 5 of season 4, and I kind of saw it as a midway point for the series as a whole. Maybe I'm stretching it a bit, but I feel like they could go for 9 seasons. And the way this episode, you don't think so? Well, we'll get into that in a sec. The way I just saw this episode, though, is that if anything, it was at least a good midpoint finale for the season itself, because, you know, certain things do get resolved in as much as they can in Game of Thrones. You know, certain bad characters get killed off, so to speak. We have a lot of characters or events that occur in the first season, especially at the very, very beginning of the first season, get brought up again or get discussed. You know, we have the whole idea of Lysa Tully and her involvement in the affairs of Westeros, so to speak, getting, you know, dealt with in this episode. There was a mention of Robert Baratheon again later on with Tywin and Cersei, and a few more events. I don't want to get into it, but that's kind of what I read into the title per se. In terms of this specific episode, I thought it was, you know, a reminder of the first things that happen in the series being brought up again in this episode, and more or less things getting tied up or getting resolved, so to speak. So
I agree, and a lot of commentators have said that online. That you know, the Red Wedding was kind of the end of a 3-act play, but in the context of this HBO show, this is the beginning of a new thing, and I agree, Charlie.
Well, I thought it was also to show Littlefinger's, you know, involvement in everything, right? The letter sent, you get that in the preview of the episode. You get sort of the things Littlefinger had his hand in, I thought was why they went back there, to show what he actually started off doing when this whole thing began.
Yeah, you're right, and there is no other Peter in this, I don't think. So he could be the first of his name, and of course we know he's out to be that in some context. So
very true.
And I'm pretty sure you have a great point about the influence of the first of his name, kind of referring to what starts off. And Jon Arryn, Jon Snow, arguably being named after Jon Arryn, but really being arguably John Connington. So it's not really first of his name. And you got Tommen, obviously, but I like your comment, Maester Payne, too, about Littlefinger. It's a good point. By the way, somebody pointed out in a video that Littlefinger has everybody wrapped around his little finger. He's manipulating everybody, and that arguably is what that intended to be a reference to. But I love the idea first of his name of Littlefinger. Peter Baelish comes from nothing, as far as we know. Comes from nothing, basically, so he's creating his first name. But to add to that, too, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, we get a mention of Ned's older brother in this episode, Bran.
Yes.
Bran is not the first of his name, and if we're to believe what old Nan tells us, there's at least Brandon, and the Night's King being Brandon, and Bran the Builder.
Brandon the Burner.
Guys, let me just interrupt you to welcome Eli to our call.
Hey, sorry about that. I had to go download Chrome for some reason.
At least you're with us now, Eli. Do you want to introduce yourself? We're talking about the first scene of the episode with Cersei and Marjorie Tyrell and the coronation of Tommen the First Baratheon.
All right, yeah, just letting everybody know, my name's Eli Knight. I actually don't have my own channel at the moment, so you'll find me here. So other than that, just ready to catch up.
Excellent. So I don't know if you wanted to give any input on this first scene, Eli, or if you guys wanted to go into the next scene, or if anybody else had any input on this coronation scene / Marjorie Cersei scene.
Well, we've already had our. I think we've.
Yeah, I'll just catch up.
Eli, okay.
Sounds good. Alrighty, so next scene, folks.
Do it.
Sure.
Alrighty, so that was the first of 3 Cersei scenes we get in this episode. The second one, where she meets with the second judge that will be at Tyrion's trial, is, of course, her father. So she goes and meets with her father, Tywin, and she basically seems not only she not only encourages the idea of Tom and Marjorie marrying, and that also she is perfectly apparently fine with herself marrying Loras Tyrell, which is quite surprising. Again, there was a lot of discussion of her own role to play in this whole series, not only her own role, but also of her family. You know, Cersei and Tywin talk about the importance of family unity and how, you know, not only Jaime apparently destroyed it according to her, but Tyrion played a role in ruining Tywin's plans. And I think, you know, that more or less was her way of saying, oh, you're going to let your other son ruin your own solid foundation for the Lannister future, which is an interesting way to go, because I wonder if they're going to use this as the catalyst to make Tywin not vote against his own son, but side against his son's innocence during this next trial that's going to happen in, I guess, a couple episodes. And one last thought I want to bring up before I get into discussing this whole scene with you guys is the reaffirmation of the Iron Bank of Braavos, of course, because we now learn a new piece of information that I don't think's in the books. That is that Casterly Rock and all the Lannisters' lands basically don't have any gold mines, or they're no longer producing any gold. So this more or less shows that the Lannisters really do have to maintain a dependence on the Tyrells, which is quite interesting and quite surprising. And I think it's also interesting because in a couple of, well, the wedding episode where Joffrey was killed, we have Tywin and Lady Olenna discussing, and Tywin seems less concerned about, you know, the whole Bank of Bravo situation and the monetary concerns. But here he really seems to tell Cersei, you know, that this is a serious concern for them. So I don't know what you guys thought of that scene.
Well, first of all, James and I figured that out about Casterly Rock a long time ago.
Yes.
And
Good job.
We put it in one of our videos. The other thing that James and I noticed in one of the books is that there's some figure who went into Casterly Rock, and I can't remember who it is, James, but we suspect that they may have taken whatever riches Casterly Rock had and have hidden them. And if the mines are gone and they've taken any particular things of value out of Casterly Rock, then the Lannisters truly have nothing. As to that scene you said between Cersei and Tywin talking about it, whereas Tywin wouldn't talk about it to Olenna, he's not going to admit to anything to Olenna, but he does want Cersei to know how critical it is that she does marry Loras. This isn't playing games. They're broke.
If I could just say one quick thing in response to that, LaDonna. Are you referring, when you mentioned the Casterly Rock losing all their wealth, are you referring to when the Lannisters, or the original Lannisters, I guess, winked the wealth from the Casterlys, the original inhabitants of that stronghold?
Nope.
No?
Nope. James and I posited a long time ago that the mines were done. But the second thing is, there is somebody in the 4th or 5th book, there's some mention of that person going to either Casterly Rock or Lannisport or somewhere, and to safeguard whatever they have. And I'm wondering if they didn't plunder whatever they have left. And
I can clarify that if you want.
yeah, you go ahead.
Go for it.
Robb told, I think it was the Umbers, it could have been a different sect, to go to one of Tywin's main mines and take whatever was there, or storage places. But there's not a mention of it again, so we're not really sure, and it's not in the TV show. Can I wax poetic on a couple of different points in this area?
Go for it.
Please do.
In this particular conversation. First off, did y'all notice that Tywin pours Cersei and himself a glass of wine? And he refused Tyrion wine when Tyrion tried to join him in conversation. He put a hand over his cup, and he was like, and I think that that's just meant to show us that Tywin, even if he does care about his legacy, his family, he certainly seems to be willing to manipulate them. But he also, when he was speaking to Olenna, trying to get Loras to be engaged to Cersei, Olenna's like, she's old. She's probably going to go through menopause soon, which she probably is right now. But Tywin's unable to see through that. Well, that to me is painting Tywin as unable to see the weaknesses. He's able to see the weaknesses in his own children, but he blinds himself to it to a certain extent, which is why at the end of this scene, when Cersei makes the comment about, and Tyrion tried to destroy that legacy, it's easy for us to believe that that may affect Tywin, that he's not as cold-natured to his children's opinions as it appears. I think there's also a scene in the books with Jaime dreaming and seeing Rhaegar in the place where the gold is stored, supposedly, and it being empty, which is foreshadowing in the book of what we've just been told, that it is empty. Why Rhaegar, I'm not quite sure, unless Jaime is Targaryen. But there's also Loras is already there. Okay, so here's what I wanted to say. You were talking about how the three scenes I did not think about it, but you're right. The three scenes we get with Cersei are Tywin, are basically the three judges manipulating them. Well, I'm gonna mention what's in the preview for the next episode. So if anybody doesn't want to hear that, I'm about to point it out.
Go for it.
In the preview, somebody says this is not a trial. This is a farce. And I don't know who says it, but obviously there's some manipulation going on, or we're at least meant to believe that this trial may not be fair. Because we're going to see some evidence produced, but it may not be fair. I'm almost done. Last thing, nobody has any money. Tywin's out of money. Stannis is out of money. They're literally feeding off of Olenna, the Tyrells. And they burned the Riverlands, the north. We're meant, and I was going to talk about it later, but one of the most important line in this entire episode to me was Jorah telling Dany, Westeros has never been more vulnerable, because that's the truth, and it's only going to get worse before the end. Also, it's possible in The Princess and the Queen that is where the Lannisters got their money, because one of the Lannisters is put in charge of Master of Coin halfway through, and he takes all the money and divides it into thirds, 1/3 of which ends up in his own keep and is never seen again. So just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, that's a good thought. I never thought of that.
So, Jim, if I could add this too, remember when Bronn and Tyrion were talking before Blackwater, and they have books in front of them, and Bronn says, what are we going to do, throw all the books at them? And then he says, you know what really happens when there's a sack of a city? He said, food becomes the commodity. And there ain't going to be any more food. Highgarden arguably is the last place that might have crops coming in.
I think the red wine may end up being a fallback. I don't know about that.
You mean Lady Olenna's own family estate?
I forget what the name of the red wine one is. The one who's starting their own little village. I can't remember. We were talking about in the last one. Can't remember.
Eli, you got something to say on that?
Yeah, my general thoughts on this part, they weren't quite as specific as what some of you guys were getting into. I kind of saw the more broad strokes when it pertained to the mines being dried up. And I don't know particularly how political George is or anything, but I saw it a lot as a reflection of the U.S. and the central banking system, where we're just making up money, rather than, and kind of in debt to this giant overseas in the East, China, that whole thing. But
there's also the derivatives market now that's existed, where you're allowed to bet on so you take money and you bet on what's going to end up happening with what you put that money in.
That's how I make my living, is binary options.
And somebody else is allowed to bet on that. End up with this huge world market that's based on betting on who's going to end up with money, and some people betting that people are going to lose.
Yeah, that's like that movie with Eddie Murphy where the two old guys just bet on him. Also, I like the fact that they compared the Iron Bank to a temple, that even though the stones may crumble, the temple remains. Somebody just takes the place.
That was beautiful.
It's not it's a corporation, and you can't touch it.
Great thought. No, I love that image. I had two thoughts. I don't know if Maester Payne had anything to say first.
I'm not
though.
sure Eli was.
Go ahead.
Or Eli, sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure Eli was finished saying what he was going to say.
Oh, it was just really pointing to, with gold being their main commodity, especially in their symbol of their house, even almost to an extent, just kind of the whole Fort Knox thing with us. We don't actually have all the gold for the money we're putting out there, and that's kind of what they're doing. They're fronting and acting as if they have all of this wealth when it's not actually backed up by any actual material.
Not only,
And that's eventually going to crumble underneath them.
yeah, and the last thing I'm going to say, I'm going to step outside for a second, is it's very ironic that the not real motto of House Lannister, but the one everybody knows, is a Lannister always pays their debts. So how ironic is it that they're broke?
Yeah.
I also thought when they always say about Tywin how he shits gold, that's kind of how he just makes it up. You know, that there is more gold, you know.
Like that.
Well,
Maester Payne, what were you about to
so
say?
that may not be too ironic. That may not be too ironic about a Lannister always pays their debts, because the bank is coming, so they're going to pay it one way or the other.
Maester Payne, did you have anything to say?
Just off of what LaDonna just said, there's another suspect for Tywin being poisoned.
How would that work?
Possibly. I don't know. It just popped into my head right when you were speaking.
That's an interesting point.
But, I mean, they could have sent somebody in to poison him just to get him out of there, to make room for somebody of less authority running things for the Lannisters, right? Make them easier to take over.
Destabilize. Yeah.
Very good thought.
So I also like the idea in the long run, and James, you and I have talked about this, where Tyrion promised the clanspeople at the Vale that they could have the Vale if they helped him, and Tywin kind of skedaddled him back after Tyrion got hurt. But I think Tyrion's going to pay that debt back by giving.
I agree.
I can see that.
Mom, you have disagreed with me saying that for so long. Every time I mention it, you disagree with me.
Well, let me say this. If Tyrion lives, it's a given. The question is whether Tyrion lives or not.
And
Can I
Tyrion,
add something, or should I wait till we get to that part in the thing?
Go now.
Okay. Go for it.
Robin in the books and the show to Tyrion. I want to see him fly. Just saying.
Didn't think about that. I never thought about that.
I had a couple points I wanted to go back to. We kind of got sidetracked from what I wanted to say originally.
Maester
It goes,
Payne blew my mind. I just want to put that out there because it is arguably, and I don't know if you meant this, and a direct reference to the possibility that Tyrion will ride a dragon.
Yes,
That's not my
that's
theory.
always what I've thought of that. He's going to pay his debts. He's promised to give them the Vale, and Robin says, I want to see him fly. So careful what you wish for.
And I certainly, to add to what my mom said, I certainly think that if Tyrion, I'm of the opinion Tyrion survives, without a doubt. And I don't see him trying to dragon, but it's possible. But I definitely think he's the one who negotiates the finances of Westeros with the Iron Bank. I also think that he will be the one to, that's basically what I wanted to say. Do y'all see any connection between the Faceless Men and the Iron Bank? I mean, they're obviously from the same place, but do y'all think they're connected?
Yeah.
I don't know.
maybe
Sorry.
the Iron Bank. Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
I don't know that they're connected, or if the Iron Bank will use them, hire them, sort of thing.
But with the way that they do their debts, it has to be wished for, so the Iron Bank couldn't pay for assassinations. That's the only reason I don't.
I would agree with you, but it appears as if the Faceless Men have somebody at Old Town who's trying to steal something from oh man, who's the guy who has the candle lit?
Oh, Barwin?
Marwyn. We think it's the Faceless Man. I don't know, but it appears to be a Faceless Man ransacked his. Actually, I don't know if it's a Faceless Man. There is a Faceless Man there because we see the guy killed and he comes back, but I don't know if it's that guy who ransacks Marwyn's.
If I can go back on something you said earlier, James, for a change. Because you brought up this analogy about Tywin kind of being blind to his own family's flaws. You were bringing that up in the context of Cersei marrying Loras Tyrell. I was just thinking on that a little bit. Do you think this is also kind of hinting at Tywin's own maybe ignorance with respect to women in general? I mean, if you want to put a feminist spin on things.
I would view it. You have a great point. I would view it as Tywin views anything different from what he expects as lesser, and that would mean women. It would
Precisely.
mean cripples, people with disabilities. Yeah, you have a good point.
My second thought I want to bring up, kind of on the same note about Tywin being a little bit blind to his own family on some occasions. You and LaDonna, you both love to discuss manipulation and people using each other in this series. Did any of you get a hint, and I kind of brought this question up a little bit earlier, but did any of you kind of get a hint that Cersei was successfully manipulating Tywin in this context? Because she was the one, putting ideas into his mind for a change about the trial process, Tyrion's own innocence or guilt. That's kind of interesting because usually Tywin's the one using his children, as you say, but in this case, could it be that Cersei's the one using her father for a change?
I like that you brought that up because that was my kind of feeling on Cersei in this entire episode, how she kind of changed and was getting along, like you said even in your own video, getting along with people she didn't normally get along with. And it kind of seemed like she was a little nice to everyone, and I kind of think it's for a benevolent purpose. She's attempting to manipulate now because she kind of sees that she is in a situation where she needs to manipulate everyone she can. And Tywin does reiterate to her that they are not as powerful as they once were.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it, LaDonna.
Why didn't Tywin just tell Cersei, "I've got it in the bag, the boy's going down"?
Well, that's kind of why I was wondering if she was successfully manipulating her father.
But does she need to manipulate him? I mean, I've kind of always got the impression that Tywin wanted him out anyway. Why would Cersei have to go to him, and why would Tywin play it so close to the vest as far as how he's going to vote?
But he's always kept Tyrion alive. He even says that he would have killed him, but he never has. So maybe he was intending to send him to the wall. Like maybe he's just not a kinslayer.
Okay.
Right.
It could be.
I agree with Maester Payne on that. There's this idea constantly reaffirmed in the Song of Ice and Fire and in Game of Thrones that Tywin values to the Lannister bloodline, even if it's Tyrion of all people. He still would not kill one of his fellow kind, so to speak. So
and
that's why I was. Go ahead.
Finish, Charlie.
No, that's all.
Oh, and even if Tyrion was found guilty, regardless of how he looked at Tyrion, it's still a blight on their house, which he will not have.
Good point.
Good point. To me, the reason my mom brought it up, and I may be wrong, but the reason my mom brought that up is because by having us face whether Tywin would hurt his own son, we're also forced to question, would he be responsible for Joffrey's death? Because if he didn't kill Tyrion, he certainly wouldn't have killed Joffrey, who was king.
Exactly.
So, I mean, to me, that's one more notch off of why he was not the one who did it.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Perfect. Any other thoughts on this specific scene, folks, or should we move on to the next Cersei scene?
I'm good.
Good.
Alrighty, I'll take that as a roundhouse yes. Sorry. So then after we have her scene with Tywin, we have Cersei meet with Oberyn Martell. And can I just point out, folks, that this is the first time we do not see Oberyn Martell doing or thinking or saying anything sexual for a change.
Can I get a round of applause for that? Jeez.
I know. Go, Oberyn.
Although I have to add that I read somebody say, I can't remember where I read it, but somebody whose first language wasn't English, when Cersei says, she says, "Are you writing a something?" And he says, "A poem, actually." Because of the language difference, this person doesn't speak English as their main language. They heard him say, "A porn, actually." And if you listen to it again, it does kind of sound like that.
Well, you would think, considering what's always on his mind, this isn't all that surprising. Alrighty, so of course Cersei is speaking to Oberyn Martell, and once again, for another first for her with this character, they're getting along. Seemingly, they're bonding over their dead relatives, which is a bit strange when you think of it that way. But at the end of the day, they are sharing something they have in common, whether or not Cersei's being genuine about it. We also find out, more about Myrcella, that she is fine in Dorne, and she seems to be getting along there all right. Cersei also asks Oberyn to bring a ship back for her at Sunspear. I brought up a sort of theme I felt was going on with this ship image, and I could bring it up again. I'll bring it up later on when we talk about Daenerys, but I have this feeling that the ship or boats in general are kind of a symbol for the homeland or for a home. I don't know what you guys think on that. I can address it a bit later on. Any thoughts on this specific scene? Oh, one last thing. We do get one of the Sand Snakes mentioned, Elia, the fifth daughter. I think it's the oldest of Alaria Sand's own kids, because the other oldest four are from other women. So it was interesting. We learned that she's hot-headed. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that specific daughter.
The one that's mentioned in Winds of Winter being Lake Lyanna part horse?
I do not know.
I think that's I may be wrong, but I think that's Sorella.
No, I don't think that was.
No. Which one do you think it is? I'll look it up.
I thought it was Elia or Elia. Or something like that, but I could be wrong too.
I think you're right, actually. Wait, maybe you're right, Maester, because she is described as being very wild and uncontrolled, so that would make sense given the imagery.
And a great rider of a horse, which throws us back to sort of misbehaving stuff.
I've got a few thoughts on that scene, if I could throw them on in here.
Lay it out, LaDonna. Let's hear it.
The first thing is about the fact that he's writing a poem, because to me it shows that as a second son, he has no real thoughts about anything but enjoying the delights of life, and that includes literature. But it doesn't, and of course it also includes his single-minded mission to kill the Mountain. But it also shows that he has no real political, he doesn't do anything in his spare time except mess around.
I never saw it like that. That makes a lot of sense, though.
And
it's a really good thought.
Speaks deeper to his character.
Yeah, and it kind of is a little bit in contrast to Tyrion, who has been a debaucher. You know, he loves his wine and his women, but in his side times, he is still building sanitation and being the hand of the king and doing all kinds of things. He's a commander of an army at Blackwater. In other words, I think that Oberyn is really pretty footloose and fancy-free, as opposed to Tyrion, who embraces it all but has a serious side.
So is that why he got killed off?
Maybe.
Maybe there's a point to be made there.
Yeah, and also the fact, well, first of all, Cersei's still manipulating folks, and she finds a way to make people relate to each other, and then she utilizes it and twists it. That's why she's talking about their dead relatives, in my opinion. But the other thing that I found really strange, folks, Myrcella is a hostage, essentially. I mean, she's being taken care of, but she's also kind of like Theon.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's very bizarre that Cersei doesn't send clothes or jewelry. She sends a ship so Myrcella can get the hell away.
You think so?
Well, I mean, I think we have to think about that. If I were the Martells, or if I were the Martells or Tywin Lannister, I'd be mad as hell that she sent a ship.
I thought there was possible foreshadowing. I mean, I think you're right about why she sent the ship, but the line of Myrcella loves the open water. Could there be a drowning in her future?
That's a good point, and that would mirror Steffan Baratheon and his wife coming back from the Martell area when they went to find a wife for Rhaegar.
Very true.
Right. Go ahead.
Oh, well, you guys can go on. My thoughts on the scene.
Do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my only thoughts, I actually liked the scene, the whole conversation, how it played and everything. My only problem was production-wise, just more of the show, and that was just, you're having this conversation about a ship, and then, which one? Oh, that ship, the only ship in the sea. I was just like, why couldn't it be in a dock, or at least more than one ship on the water? It seemed really convenient. But that was, a real small nitpicky thing. But I did love that final line that Cersei said about they kill little girls everywhere. kind of telling her that when push comes to shove, you'll do things you wouldn't think you would do, and she's not necessarily safe. Just as Theon was safe once he betrayed, he wasn't safe in all reality.
Good point.
Also foreshadowing things to come.
I love that.
We don't hurt little girls in Dorne, but guess what's going to happen in a couple books or seasons.
Yeah.
It also absolutely mirrored our real news, where those 300 girls were stolen from the schools in Nigeria.
Oh, I did not hear about that.
Oh, really? Well, there's.
Yeah, we don't have to do it right now, but I'll look it up. Just trust me.
I know what you're talking about, LaDonna. Yeah, interesting thought.
To me, that line was beautiful too, and that's a good point, Mom. It was 200 girls, 200 and almost 30 escaped. I'm pretty sure that's right, but that's a lot of girls. And the ship to me, I believe what she says is, I'd like to believe. He says last time I saw her, she was playing with one of my daughters near a pool, and she says, "I'd like to believe that." Hold up, I'd like to believe that. She's getting mad at me, but we're trying not to interrupt. She says, "I'd like to believe that," and he says, "We don't hurt little girls in Dorne," and she says, "Everywhere in the world they hurt little girls."
That's what it was.
And it's true, and just saying girls brings that up. But the truth is, everywhere in the world, they hurt children. Even the most lucky child in the world had his heart broken at some point. We all have to have that visage of perfection broken at some point, if not from the get-go. So the ship, to me, certainly was a message being sent to her daughter that she can come home whenever she wants. That's certainly the overarching message, in my opinion. But I agree, we have to ask ourselves, is there something on that ship being hidden? Is there some secret message about... But, I mean, wouldn't Oberyn be smart enough to catch that? And he says, "I'll send my people to take that ship back." Well, pretty sure his people are going to look all over that ship.
Yeah. It'd be a very thorough search of that vessel.
Yeah.
Make sure it's not filled with wildfire.
Yeah. That would be very dangerous.
That it was a statement that Cersei had been locked into a marriage she couldn't get out of, and maybe if Myrcella couldn't handle it or didn't want it, she could come home, and Cersei never had that opportunity.
And what does Jaime always... Jaime keeps saying, escape. I mean, lock yourself inside. Well, Cersei's kind of saying, run away. I mean, it's a difference. She's a little kid, but in a way, Cersei's giving her an opportunity to run away. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that is not in the books at all.
I didn't remember it.
Okay.
So, do you folks have any other thoughts on this specific scene, or shall we move on?
I want to add that I cannot tell if Cersei, to what extent, I think we're intentionally done this way, but the first thing we get was Cersei, her manipulating Marjorie. They're both aware that they're lying, but she's lying. And then we get the next scene with Tywin, where she ends it jabbing Tywin. I cannot tell in that scene with Cersei and Oberyn whether she's manipulating him or not, and it's intended that way. She cries over her child, and she is obviously kind of referencing Joffrey when she does it. But I mean, we're meant to not be sure.
Well, that's why I think Cersei's such a brilliant character. I mean, I think in everything she's saying, there's a hint of truth. She is being genuine to some extent when she's talking to Marjorie, to Tywin, and especially to Oberyn. I'm sure she does miss her dead son, and is mourning him very obviously. And I think she is also playing that to her advantage in many ways in these situations.
And speaking on what you just said, Charlie.
Yeah.
Tyrion says about Tywin, always turning a family tragedy into an advantage or something like that. Tyrion said that in the previous episode.
What Charlie just said, the best lies always have a grain of truth in them. So if she was manipulating him, she would be telling a bit of truth and showing true emotion if she was a good manipulator.
Did Littlefinger say that line? The one you just quoted, or is that something?
No, that's just a saying from real life.
Oh, actually, okay, I didn't even know that.
The best lies have a grain of truth in them, or start with a grain of truth. I don't remember exactly how it goes.
Good thought. For some reason, I thought that'd be something Littlefinger would say. I don't know.
It does sound like that.
We're all liars here.
Exactly. So, any other thoughts for this scene?
Nope.
No, sir.
Alrighty, let's move on to. Let's talk about my favorite character for a change. Daenerys across the Narrow Sea. So news finally travels to Daenerys about Joffrey's death. She meets with her council, I guess. Daario Naharis tells her that he has taken the Myronese navy for her, and Daenerys, kind of expresses a desire to use those ships to invade Westeros. Now, if I can just quickly talk about because I brought up in the previous scene this image of ships being a symbol for home. In this context, Daenerys would ideally use these ships to go back to her imagined home, Westeros. These ships being, the gateway to go home. So I guess this does kind of validate what LaDonna was saying about Myrcella having that ship as a gift from Cersei. I kind of just saw it originally as a reminder to Myrcella of her real home, i.e. King's Landing, in this context anyway. But of course, she could totally use it to go home if push comes to shove, as you say. But moving it along, generally speaking, Daenerys' advisors are pretty optimistic, I would say, about seizing King's Landing, although Jorah Mormont kind of warns that it might not be a good idea, considering the navy at King's Landing is still more numerous than her own. And there's also troubles brewing in the regions of Slaver's Bay. Yunkai, I think wise masters have risen back up in power and reclaimed the city. And meanwhile, in Astapor, we have that Cleon the Butcher who deposed the council that Daenerys put in place when she left, and he has taken control of that city. And I got to say, I really am happy that they stuck to those pieces of information as they occurred in the books. I don't know. I didn't think they would do it originally, but I'm glad they did at the end of the day, and I'm curious to see how they're gonna progress with that arc in Essos. Anyway, after basically seeking advice from Jorah privately, she finally informs him and us, the viewers, that she intends to rule Slaver's Bay. I think her famous line was, "If I can't rule 3 cities, then how on earth am I going to rule 7 kingdoms?" Which is pretty telling. So I could kind of see her, given that we, the book readers, don't really know yet what her long-term intentions are, I could see her, ruling Slaver's Bay as a sort of test drive of queenship. At least that's my own personal wish, but who knows what's going to happen, of course. I don't know what you guys thought of that specific scene, or if you had any deeper insights.
Mine's pretty short, so I'll knock it out. I wanted to point out in that scene that Dany and Daario, for like the 5th time we've gotten Dany being like, Daario, and then it ending with her being like, "Oh, Daario." So they've done it repeatedly. When he volunteers and she's like, "Oh, whatever." Missandei's like, "He's very brave," and she goes, "Yeah, whether he dies or lives, it won't really matter. We win either way." And that's like the 5th time we've seen it. So I'm not sure why the show's building it up that way. I guess obviously it's because they're going to be boning later, and but why does Dany have to fight it so much? And I guess they're building up Hystos or Lorak and him. I think there's an argument to be said that she and Daario are already boning in the show.
James.
Kept in the background. Yeah.
Could I just interrupt you quickly? Sorry. Because I want to address what you're just saying right now, actually, about her relationship with Daario. Do you also think they're sort of playing up her relationship with Jorah as well, to an extent? Because in the last few scenes and episodes, she's been really, really friendly with him. Maybe not to the point of, them having a relationship. My personal opinion is just that they might play up their potential relationship until, maybe Jorah makes a move on her, and then she rejects him completely, and then that's when his whole arc falls apart, and then, he gets sent away. I don't know what you guys think on that.
I think you're exactly right.
And they haven't put the kiss in there. That they put Jorah being the main confidant in this episode, number one, to bring him back into the fold, to remind us that he is basically her hand, but also so that pretty soon we're going to get Barristan revealing to Dany what Jorah is, and that's going to become a huge thing, and we might even get the kiss soon.
I think y'all are right. I mean, she's kind of distanced Jorah in the show a lot. The TV viewers have got to know that Jorah is still her right-hand man as far as the base decisions she makes. To bring that back so that when they do push Jorah out, the audience is going to feel pretty heartfelt about him going. Another thing, Charlie, you mentioned about Dany and her boats being maybe connected to Myrcella's boats, and it made me think it's really interesting. Myrcella's boat may take her home, But Dany's boats are going to take her to a place that she's never ever lived.
And that's why I emphasize the fictive home or the idealized home.
Yeah, it's like her not home, and it's almost like she keeps having that red door vision. That's really her home. She's really going to a place that's not her home, and I think that might be a curse. But I did want to say one thing, Charlie. She looked exquisitely beautiful in this scene.
Didn't she?
Yeah.
Like a queen.
There was one thing on just on what you were saying, Charlie, with the boats and the longing for home thing that I had never really considered or thought of that often, aside from right now when you brought it up, was I think that, and LaDonna just reiterated it, that she's slowly learning that that's not her home, and that the Misa, all that, she's gonna maybe, I don't know, this is just more long-term theory, but what if she eventually realizes that she doesn't need to ever go back to Westeros? Like,
good point. Good point. I mean, Myrcella's assumedly making Dorne her new home. She's getting used to the Dornish way of life, and according to Oberyn Martell, she's getting along fine there. And perhaps just like her, Daenerys is getting used to her current home and starting to identify more with that region than any idea or image of Westeros in the end of the day.
Yeah, and she wouldn't, in any real sense, know how things worked over there. They work completely different from the way that she has worked,
Very true.
But that was just came up when you were talking about that. I'd never thought about that before.
To me, when Dany, I was initially a little frustrated with the way they presented why Dany stays in Slaver's Bay, because it seemed like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to give some vague answer that allows you to give your own interpretation, which the vague answer must be something more. But I think that's a perfect way to do it, because there's a lot of reasons. Number one, the whole reason she freed the slaves in the first place was because she felt a moral duty. Well, what kind of moral duty is it to then abandon them to the whims of whoever ended up in charge all over again? So there's that. There's the moral obligation. But it's also that's the leader she wants to be, she thinks. So she's teaching herself how to do that properly. And, I mean, this 3 cities, she's right. How can I not control 3 cities and then expect to control Westeros? This is 3 cities, 3 huge cities. She also doesn't have the lords under her to control their own little areas. But, I mean, she has a point with that. I worry that the viewers aren't quite aware of the depth of why she does that, and especially with the frustration I bet viewers are having with the Slaver's Bay being up in rebellion again, basically, because they just watched it happen over. She took a city, she took another city, she took another city, and now she's finding out she's got to go take the one she already took. But I think that's also why they sped it up. I mean, we got this sacking of Marine in 1 episode, 2 episodes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
the sacking of every city happened in a single episode, which
pretty much
to book readers was like, what? But in the show it makes sense. You had to kind of do it that way.
And we never saw the inside of Yunkai.
Very true.
They left right away. The second they took it, they were leaving.
Did she even go in Yunkai? She kind of just stood at the gates and waited for all the slaves to walk out.
That's funny.
Grey Worm and Daria.
Yeah.
Right. Great thoughts, James. Oh, go ahead, LaDonna.
She's not had sex with Daria yet. That's going to be a big build-up. We're going to see that scene's going to be something that Charlie's been waiting on. Everybody.
Touche.
Glossy that one.
Well, just a quick thought, and I appreciate that, LaDonna. I kind of agree with you. I think they're going to play that scene up really, really greatly. But something that James said, I mean, you did mention that, she can't exactly abandon her slaves now. And I don't think she's going to do this, and I highly doubt they'll do this in the books or even in the show. But, I mean, she could, technically speaking, pull a what's her name? The Dornish queen.
Nymeria?
She could pull a Queen Nymeria and bring all the slaves over, but I don't think that's going to happen. Just a thought. That way it's a win-win, right? She doesn't give up her slaves, and she gets the 7 kingdoms.
That would be epic.
Arguably, when Dany gets to Westeros, she doesn't have to deal with a slave community. I mean, everybody kind of has the same culture like the States.
I also think it's ironic that to the people, if I'm right at all, and Dany doesn't come back with her army, she's kind of just comes back because Drogon drops her off, and it's the rest of it's yours responsibility to get these slaves. I think it would be very odd for any ruler who wants to take, like, she wants Westeros because she wants Westeros, not because she wants to take it over so her people have somewhere to go. She wants Westeros. It's really odd for her to show up and go, I'm claiming all these lands. Also, I brought all these foreigners over. That seems odd to me. I mean, it's what happens. You take over a land because you want to supplant it with your own people, but that's not what she wanted. She just, to me, it is apparent to me in its entirety that Westeros is an illusion for her. It is this, what do you call it? It's a mirage. It's this thing she sees. It's the home you're talking about. It's the imaginary idea of home. I know you're hating me right now, Charlie in Westeros, even though you're not in my head. But to me, it's not what she wants. It's the red door. That's the point of the red door. It's this imaginary thing she thinks she wants.
Well,
I agree with you.
It could be the red herring since he is a writer.
Check off gun, though.
Red door, red herring. LaDonna, you wanted to say something?
well, I mean, she's not following her dream. She's following her brother's dream.
And her
Very
family's
true.
dream. And that's when you said home, Charlie, all I could think of was a quote from, I love the movie. I know it's sappy, but I love the movie Garden State. There's a quote in that movie where the main character says, maybe that's what family is, a group of people who all miss the same imaginary place.
That's a cool. I've never seen that. That's a really cool line.
I've never seen that movie, but I like that.
An interesting take on it if you think that everybody is always pissed off that it's taken Dany so long to come to Westeros, paralleling how we view things occurring in other places. Like, we just don't really care about them as much as we care about stuff on our own doorstep. We don't want her there. We want her here. Sort of. Like, I think he might be playing with that, sort of.
That's a good point.
Just taking so long.
If Dany left, here's a question for the readers, the general readership. If Dany left Essos by herself and left Meereen and all them to their own whatever they decided, would the general viewership care anymore about Meereen and Yunkai and Astapor? I'm sure in general they would.
No.
But I think they would just be like, finally, Dany's in Westeros.
I was watching it with somebody who didn't watch, and he's like, well, that's going to take some time. I was like, more than you know, because it's going to take forever. And I think he's playing with that. Like, why do we want her over here so bad? Why don't we care about the people over there where it's her story, but we want her here in our story?
Right.
We think the Iron Throne and everything.
I'm surprised, and I don't understand why nobody has turned to Dany and said, why Westeros? Just stay here. All these people support you. They're from here. Just stay here. You have 3 cities, and arguably you could then take over the Dothraki. Good luck. But
Continue. I'll be right back.
That goes to what I've been saying. This is not her dream. This was her brother's. And I think it's a fake mission, and I think it's a fake...
You have a point, but then again, ask yourself, why did Aegon the Conqueror leave Dragonstone? He left Valyria because it's...
Manifest destiny.
Okay, that is a bullshit answer.
But an epic one nonetheless.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if we... Did you guys have any more thoughts on this region, or did you want to move on? I could say a few more things, but I don't think it's necessary.
Do it, Charlie. Knock them out.
Okay, well, it's just a small thought, really. I think in some ways, and maybe this is me stretching a little bit, I think that Daenerys, in some ways, more or less, I mean, in some ways speaks to recent immigrant communities. Like, I live in Toronto, and we get a lot of people here, who are recently moved here from other countries, and they oftentimes idealize the places that they either had to leave or chose to leave. And, in many ways, they kind of idealize that image of the homeland. It kind of gets played up. I'm half Polish, so like I'm in contact with a lot of people here in Toronto who are from the Polish community, and they're oftentimes viewed even in Poland as more nationalistic than people over there are, which is quite interesting. So I can kind of see that parallel with Daenerys in a way, and maybe this is a bit of a contradiction to what LaDonna was saying, but in some ways, this idea that Daenerys belongs in this other region, in this other place called Westeros, it almost kind of creates the image that this dream of her brother's more or less became her own dream by growing up with him and by, having these shared thoughts with him for so long, at least in so far as her life is. I mean, she's only 16, 17 years old, right? So
I like that.
I like it too. It's almost like she's a nationalist for a country she's never been to, and she's in completely different countries. And I mean, the fact that you don't really see it that much in Westeros, but there's certain aspects of jingoism, which is basically extreme nationalism, played up. Like, she puts up her Targaryen flag when she enters the city of Meereen. They don't know who the fuck they are.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what that means.
She's like, yeah, Team Targaryen. Up there, and they're kind of like, what is this? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, she doesn't even barely know. She only knows one Targaryen, and he's dead.
Exactly. She has an idealized image of what a Targaryen is.
Yeah.
And plays it up. Mother of dragons, Khaleesi, Misa, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing, and it's just a throwaway?
Go for it.
So sad that Aemon Targaryen died before she got to meet him.
Yes, I really wanted him to meet her. I really did I really wanted that to happen, but it is what it is.
The only other thing.
Go ahead, Eli.
Never mind.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna throw in. It's just like LaDonna. It's a quick throwaway, but I just thought of it since we've been talking so heavily about the slaves and the slaving situation in Westeros as compared to Essos, and isn't it a very odd coincidence that the one of the few leaders from Westeros who's over there with her was booted out for what? Slaving?
Slaving.
I thought that was very I think that's a very big coincidence there. I don't know what it means, but...
No, you're onto something, Eli. I don't know if, James, you wanted to go first, or I can bring up my point.
No, I think James has this. I think he mentioned it.
Or Maester. Go ahead.
Maester Payne, yeah.
Maester.
No, I had nothing. I thought James had already touched on this earlier with Sir Jorah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he may have. I stepped away for a second. I may have missed it.
Okay. I think I missed that too, actually. No, I didn't. Yeah, you're right. Just because of this image of the slavery situation, I do think it's very, very ironic, and I think I brought this up before. Maybe I shouldn't repeat it, but the idea that the Valyrians were slavers, and they controlled all of Slaver's Bay and enslaved that whole region, and arguably, at least in my mind, might have brought in slavery to that region. So it's very ironic that Daenerys is going back to that region as a descendant of old Valyria and freeing the slaves and kind of breaking this legacy with her own past, in a way.
Good point. And I sincerely, this is random, and I don't have any evidence for sure, but I think that Martin will ultimately, at the end of the Song of Ice and Fire, have a culmination of all the sins of man that have occurred throughout the millennia, including the Valyria, the slaves, and I think you have a point with the slavery in the Slaver's Bay being a result of Dany. In the second book, Dany finds a city of white buildings in which, I mean, white buildings to me makes me think that it was built out of white trees. It doesn't seem to be stone. I mean, it doesn't say it's stone, which makes me think weirwood. I just think this goes back a really long ways.
I've been wanting to check into those cities.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No idea.
So any other thoughts on this scene? We've kind of dwelt on it quite a while. So.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Alrighty. Let's move on to LaDonna's favorite characters for a change. Her favorite character, the Hound and Arya.
Yeah.
And I think we can kind of parallel these scenes in the Riverlands with Brienne and Podrick's scenes on the King's Road. So if you guys want, we can talk about them in tandem. It's up to you guys, but I'll recap the Riverlands first. So we have Arya and Sandor Clegane, discussing the... Well, she's lying asleep, and, she's reciting the names of people she wants to kill, and he kind of mocks her a little bit for it, and then he relates that he kind of wants to kill his own brother, but then, when she starts inquiring about that, he dismisses her. Before she goes to bed, she reveals his name, of course. She says, the Hound. So clearly she still wants to kill him, which is too bad, I think, but we'll leave it at that. The next day, the Hound finds her training, doing the water dancing techniques that Syrio Forel told her. And then, we have this little, I guess, banter or back and forth between them. And it was interesting because, the Hound kind of mocks Arya about Syrio Forel being killed by Meryn Trant, even though he is the greatest, or the first sword of Bravos, I think was his title. And he keeps going on being like, oh, you mean Meryn Trant killed the first sword of Bravos? Clearly wasn't that great, even if he had a wooden sword, and so on and so forth. At the same time, I think this is a little wink to us, the viewers, and I think also it was, even though I don't think the Hound meant it in this way, I think it was a hint to us that Syrio Forel is still alive.
Agreed.
And I'm hoping we're going to see him. I'm really hoping for it, but
in the book,
I think it was a wink to the readers.
That too. Well, we haven't seen him in the books yet, though, Syrio Forel.
No. I think that was a wink to the readers from them, like from the show creators. I think that was more of a wink to us readers that, oh, he still might be around, because that line isn't said in the book, I don't think. But I think that was a wink to us readers that, come on, hang in there, guys.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I like that.
Something my mom and I are going to take credit
James,
for.
okay.
That's what she's about to say.
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
Who wants to go first, James or LaDonna? LaDonna, you go first.
I'm not taking credit for anything. I'm gonna box you. No, I was gonna say in the winter chapter, Mercy. There is somebody there named Forel.
The play was written by Forel, which is a perfect thing for Martin to do, because first sword of Bravos, he's a sword, and then he's arguably like a cousin, brother, uncle, father. Who's a pen. His strength is pen. Sword, the pen.
The pen and the sword, yeah.
Which makes me think of Jack.
Yeah. Do you think maybe this is a really, really wild and far-fetched idea that has no grounds in reality, but do you think it's at all possible that Syrio Forel and Jaqen H'ghar are maybe the same person?
I agree. I've said that in previous videos.
Oh, you have? Okay,
yeah.
I didn't even.
That's a fairly
bad memory on my part.
That's a popular theory online. I've seen a lot of people. Yeah, people like that theory. Especially because the show, for the readers before the show came out, I don't think it was so popular. But when the show, you met them right back to back like that, and they both liked Arya. So
they both have strange cadences in their voice. They both immediately call her boy. Syrio Forel disappears, and it's not like he kills him and we get some kind. He disappears, which seems odd. He goes up the Red Keep, he disappears, and Arya keeps hearing his voice. And when Arya walks through, she's using his voice like swift as a deer, sly like a fox. Yeah, I'm gay like a fox. Sorry, random. But,
that was hilarious.
But when Sansa is walking through the courtyard and there's all the people lined up on top, she's reading it. She's walking through the courtyard and there's a bunch of city watch people looking for her, and she's got to walk. She literally hears a voice. It turns from being her talking to herself to her hearing, like, him saying it in the past, to somebody speaking to her, and she can't tell where it's coming from. That, to me, is Syrio Forel hiding, trying to get her to continue on, and then later meets her as Jaqen.
Well,
I like that.
A lot of people have said Jaqen is Syrio, and it could very well be, but if you remember in that scene between Jaqen and Arya when they're parting ways before he hands the coin, he says to be a dancing master is one thing, but to be a faceless man is another.
That's his point, though.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Which leads me to believe, and of course it could be cryptic, James, I know what you're going to say, which leads me to believe that they're not the same. And I like the fact that they're not the same, because I want to see Syrio just plain be a badass swords person. But if I can also say one thing, I'm not sure the timeline works right, because we've got Arya with Arya with Syrio, then we've got Arya with Jaqen. We've got some faceless man who takes out Balon Greyjoy, and we've got the Pate who takes over the other Pate. So I'm still not sure if that theory meshes.
Well, I have to say that I think there is a strong possibility that Martin is messing with us with the idea with the faceless man, because we kind of presume it's one entity. But we know it's not, because Sansa's one, while there's one at the Citadel. So I think that without a doubt, we're going to have some kind of
I thought it was a brotherhood
within the faceless men, because Arya arguably will have to leave at a certain point, we hope, which means she's going to break whatever oath it entails, which means they might be after her. There might be a previous entity. I mean, she's Batman. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
So she's going to be leaving this
Agreed.
society in order to choose a better life, vengeance. I don't know. What does Batman want? Is it vengeance? Is it to help society? Is she going to be a crime fighter? But there might
Wear
be
a bat suit.
Hey.
She'll wear a bat suit traveling around Westeros.
Now
I
we're
love
talking.
voice.
Where she can wear House Gwent's helmet because it's got a bat on it.
There you go.
Ooh, very true.
The only difference I had in this theory that once I started reading, I started to realize that everyone was kind of looking at this theory a little different. I took it as Jack and Hagar. There was no Syrio Forel. He was not a person.
Agreed.
He was no first sort of because the one way the theory is online, or a lot of the theories online, is that he was the first sort of Bravos, became a faceless man, that type. I think that was just a straight lie, because how would they have gotten the first sort of Bravos to just be a teacher for a random, just one of the kids of House Stark? That just seemed way too convenient.
Well,
Wait, he was. Go ahead,
that's
LaDonna.
the point, because James and I have talked about this before. I mean, how convenient was it for Ned Stark to find Syrio Forel to teach her?
And he's also he's the only, this just supports, real quick, I was going to throw it in, why he wouldn't be dead is he's one of, how many characters die off screen in this movie, or the show? Nobody.
Right.
Balon
see
Greyjoy,
that
potentially?
Balon.
Yeah. Well, in the books,
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I guess they haven't said, have they said he's dead in the show?
Balon and John Arryn.
Yeah.
They have not said Balon's dead in the
Yeah.
show.
John Arryn, I kind of just took that as he died before the show started.
Good point.
He's the first mystery, if we're being honest. He's the
Yeah.
first mystery we get. But to add to what you're saying, to me, in the same way Jaqen Hagar changes his face and she calls him Jaqen and he says, Jaqen is no more. That's when he wasn't Syrio is no more. And when he says, to be a dancing master is one thing, to be a faceless man is another. Because he is buy-in, pretend that he is Syrio Forel. Then he's basically saying, to be Jaqen Hagar is one thing, but to be a faceless man is another. To be Syrio Forel is one thing, but to be a faceless man is another.
It's a mystery.
The same way that Arya always refers to her other personalities as separate people. She does not refer to them as her being them. She was once Arya, she always talks about them as separate people almost.
In Mercy chapter, it's basically like we get an untrustworthy narrator. We get Arya, we get an overarching narrator, Martin, with a limited perspective, but we also get Arya describing what's happening as if she were somebody else looking through Mercy's eyes. I'm supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to do this. Mercy would do that. And it's like she's got a split personality, and she's choosing. She's an actor. She's the ultimate mummer.
Do you think for when we finally get these other acts or characters played by the person who once was Arya, do you think they're going to keep Maisie Williams as the actress behind them, or do you think they're going to have different actors playing each role?
Good question.
Huge question. We've talked.
She's such a great actress. Oh, you have?
Oh, and I'm not. I don't mean to be a dick when I say.
No. No, I mean, like, you and LaDonna have discussed it in private, I guess, or in a video?
We've discussed that exact issue because Maisie Williams is a fantastic actress, and we're not going to want to see her disappear and brought back. But at the same time, we're going to need her changed to the extent where she's hard to recognize, at least by the other characters, arguably by us. And they got rid of the fact that Sansa had her, that Lysa didn't know who Sansa was, arguably because. She's going to recognize her, although she's never met her. But she looks like her mama. She's going to recognize her. So I really don't have an answer to that. Part of me hopes that what they do is kind of a combination. We see Arya as Arya, but we get glimpses once in a while of what other people see her as.
That's how I think it'll happen.
That would be great.
Just if I could finish recapping the scene, I left out a few details before we started getting into this discussion about Arya and her future, because after the Hound kind of jokes around with Arya or makes fun of her for training and her connection to Syrio Forel, she then jabs him in the breastplate or the stomach or the chest plate or something, and he just knocks her to the ground, telling her that her fighting style is basically useless against armored opponents. And I really want to hear what LaDonna. Actually, I want to hear what you, LaDonna, felt about this whole scene with Arya and the Hound being in conflict with each other.
Well,
and
you
everyone else, of course.
remember, Charlie, before you and I met, and James and I did that video on the Hound, and you took James' side, saying that she forgave him, if I remember correctly, and I said, I don't think she forgives him. I do kind of agree with James that she is torn when he gets injured about what to do with him, but she ultimately leaves him, and I think she leaves him to die. I said that in that video. I don't think she kills him at the end, but yeah, she is not letting go of her vengeance any more than Oberyn Martell is letting go of his on the mountain. Not wrong.
You're right. I did say that in that video, or in the comments of that video, and I was kind of surprised by the scene. I gotta say, I didn't think that she still held on to that grudge, so this did come as a bit of a surprise to me.
Well, I really saw it going either way. I mean, I understood what James's premise was in that. My opinion was that it would go down the way it did. So I was curious to see it.
My premise, though, was that when she leaves him for dead,
Right.
that's forgiveness. That has not happened yet.
No, but we're getting close to that, and that's why I think LaDonna brought this up.
May I say one more thing? I
Go
thought
for it.
a cool image, and it was kind of subliminal. The whole time she's doing that water dance, she's in front of a waterfall.
Ooh. Very cool.
Extremely good point.
How does that?
Also, Maisie Williams is a trained dancer, so I thought it was kind of cool that I think she was, I guess, embracing that side of her in this character in this scene.
Yeah.
Just my thought. Because it looked like she was dancing, literally.
I think
Anyway.
that was part of the reason they cast her originally.
Agreed.
Agreed. If I could add a couple of little things to this.
Go for it.
I loved that. We have not really gotten to see the Hound act in this way before. He's jovial, he's fucking around. I mean, he's always got to be this intimidating guy around other people, but he doesn't have to be that around Arya. Even when we see him walk into the inn in the other episode, as soon as that door opens, he changes. He goes from being like, we're not going here to... he changes who he is. And I loved him messing with her before she went to sleep, but then when she says Hound, he kind of turns to her. When he wakes up a scene later and she's not there, his reaction is priceless. He's like, holy shit, where the hell did she go? And then when we get him marrying a fucking Trant, I love that. I thought it was hilarious. The best swordsman in the world didn't have a sword on him.
Yeah, I love that. Loved it. I cracked up during that scene.
Too.
It was great.
I'm surprised we got her stabbing him, because
Right?
that was I assume that the people watching the television show are meant to think, well, of course it wouldn't have killed him, and Arya knew that. Arya was just hoping to hurt him to some extent, but I don't think that's what a viewer would see. It appears as if she tried to kill him, and he stabbed
She
her.
put some weight into it.
But I mean, I don't know. That I like it. I'm okay with it. But I was a little curious over what they intended that to be, because if it is meant to be such an overt example of Arya's desire for the Hound to be killed, maybe that's what it is. And then later, when she leaves him for dead, we're meant to think it justifies our belief that she wants him dead.
Well, you know, James, this is what you and I went over and argued with each other about in the Hound. You know, if I can say this, I do think she's conflicted over it, because she woke up earlier than him. She could have stabbed him in the neck. You know, and she's still not killing him until he pisses her off so much she does it.
Yeah, because that's one thing show watchers would think instantly is, how many times have they been asleep beside each other? If she really wanted him dead, she could have killed him.
Right.
And could have run. I mean, he doesn't tie her up to a tree like Brienne did with Jaime. I mean, she could run away. So their relationship's conflicted, and I like it.
Agreed. Agreed. Didn't she also say that she would? I don't know if she said she would stab him in the eye or in the face or something, which also
I'll
kind
stick
of
my
makes it
blade
strange.
And out the back of your skull.
Right.
Yep. Which,
You know, I
that's the one area where he did not have armor in this episode.
Yep. He doesn't have his helm anymore.
Yeah.
True. True.
All right, next.
Shall we move on to the King's Road then?
What'd you think about him hitting her?
Totally justified. He
Yeah,
warned her
yeah.
earlier. If When she had the rock, if you go ahead, girl, but if you fail, I'm gonna break both your wrists.
Yeah.
It's sexism to treat it any other way.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, and I think that what he's doing is saying, "Are you a freaking idiot?" He shows her how easy it is for him to take her out. It was like he was swatting a fly.
Yeah.
I thought
Go ahead.
I thought he didn't expect her to use so much force, and as soon as he realized that she actually tried to jam it through, he's like, so
Little bit, like he was kind of surprised that she actually tried to kill him.
you actually tried there.
Yeah.
100%. That was the look on his face. Did you really just try to do that? After he was joking about Maren Tramp. Ha ha ha.
I think we're getting really close to them separating. But
Agreed.
I hope so.
Agreed. And if I can ask y'all, when do y'all think that'll happen? The next episode, The Laws of Gods and Men. The episode after that is... Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, answering your question, did you saw the preview for next episode, right? Didn't we see the Giant of Bravos?
Yeah,
I'm
but
just imagining it.
That's Stannis.
You think that's Stannis?
I don't think we'll see Arya getting 2 Bravos in this season.
Yeah.
Really? Oh.
I agree.
I was hoping we'd see her go to Bravos. I know.
Just disappointed. Like, oh, damn it, really?
If that doesn't happen, they're really, really dragging out the Hound and the Arya series.
I think they're gonna skip a lot of the characters she turns into.
Well, they're having to drag out Arya and Bran because they're speeding up. They're going perfectly paced with Jon. They're speeding up Dany, and they're having to slow down Bran and Arya because they kind of disappear for a while.
Yeah.
And they're almost completely caught up with Sansa. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll get to that when it comes up.
If I could mention one more thing, I mentioned it last week briefly. I listened to a 3 or 4 minute interview of Thronecast with Rory McCann, who plays the Hound, and he says that you're going to see some really intimate and emotional scenes between he and Arya. So they're going to build that up before she leaves.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add that the scene with him about the mountain in Arya was pivotal because to the viewers, I told my mom this recently. In the books, it's the it's the Hound who tells Sansa how he got scarred, and he falls to his knees. Like, we have been told the mountain is horrible, and we attach that to the Hound, and he's got this scar, and then Sansa and him are walking back, and she says one little word, like sentence to him, and he just breaks down and says who he is. We don't have anything like that in the TV show. Well, my mom and I were pissed off for a while that they gave those lines to Littlefinger, but they gave those lines to Littlefinger, I think, for this season, so that they can set up him in the mountain, which, by the way, what would you do if the mountain were here? He thinks about it and says, I tell him to shut the fuck up. So talking about her, to me, that's meant to say, A, she seems to be exemplifying the mountain because she's hell-bent on vengeance, whereas the Hound had an opportunity to fight his brother and didn't, except to save Loras. I think we're meant to see, it's veiled, but that the Hound is the truest knight, as I've said before, but the vital part of that scene is that even though the mountain is the only person, it shows that the mountain is the only person he hates, but more so it shows that he says hatred is a good thing to keep a man going, arguably the best thing to keep a man going, something to that effect. And we all think that that's what gets the Hound going. But after this season, after this part of the book, if he is still alive, his whole purpose now is to redefine himself so hatred is not what keeps him going. And if it ain't hatred, it's love for Sansa.
I think arguably that scene also meant that he couldn't take out his brother even if he was in front of him.
I think you have a point. Unless there was somebody's life he was trying to protect.
Loras, yeah.
Or Sansa.
Any other thoughts on this scene, or shall we move on to the King's Road?
King's Road.
King's Road it is. So, I definitely think this scene clearly parallels, Arya and the Hound's adventures, I guess. We have, Brienne of Tarth and her squire, her new squire, Podrick Payne, riding towards, I think in the direction of the Wall, thinking that they're going to find Sansa with Jon there. We then have them at a camp where Brienne's basically scolding Podrick for not knowing how to cook or even do any of his squire duties properly. She then asks him what he did for Tyrion, and Podrick basically tells her that he once killed a knight of the Kingsguard specifically to protect Tyrion during the Battle of the Blackwater, which impresses her and gets him in her good books, and basically ends with her allowing him to help her take off her armor, which was kind of sweet. I brought this up in my own video review of the little gender bent nature of these two scenes.
I loved your point. I didn't even think about it until you brought it up in your video. It was so brilliant.
Do you want to bring up that point I made? Eli?
Run through it. You could say it 10 times better than I could.
Okay. Well, I didn't write it down on paper, but from what I recall of what I said, basically, we have the Hound and Arya, and then we have the Hound more or less taking care of Arya, but with Arya in a very male type roles, trying to learn how to fight, and the Hound's more or less in an indirect way trying to show her how to go about it.
And even scolds her like a boy.
Exactly. He treats her like a boy, basically, like a man. And the next scene we have Brienne, also fulfilling a very male role. But in this case, Podrick, at least in terms of our own understanding in our own world, I wouldn't necessarily impose that on Westeros or on that universe, because I don't really know for a fact. But I mean, we have Podrick trying to cook, trying to remove her armor. Very
screws up the
more
rabbit.
Nurturing. Yeah, he screws up the dinner. He's trying to fulfill more domestic chores or domestic tasks, and he's failing at that. And then, even though she doesn't necessarily help him out, she does relent and accept him along her side, and I guess accepts him as her. Maybe not. I wouldn't call him her pseudo wife, but a sidekick of sorts. So
yeah, I think that could have been just a little play on kind of the roles in Westeros, and it's regardless of, you could be a Kingsguard, but that doesn't mean you could cook my dinner. That it's not easy to do this if you don't know how to do it, regardless of who you are.
Very well put.
I love it. I think that was awesome.
Did you guys have any thoughts on that scene?
Maester Payne?
Did you touch on Podrick learning how to ride?
No, I didn't mention that. That was one of the issues. That's correct.
Riding in the books is a very big thing. You get it mostly with the Dothraki. Man cannot ride is no man at all. But there's symbolism of the guys on the horses all throughout the books. Ned riding into King's Landing, Tywin doing it.
Lyanna.
So I think there's something about Podrick not knowing how to ride that may play out, and I'm not exactly sure what Martin's aiming at with that, but if you look at it, it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they focus on him doing that, kind of falling off the saddle, so I definitely see that.
You were watching Maester Payne.
Even Ned, when he's in his cell, he's thinking about when he rode in, and there's all sorts of things.
I love that Maester Payne. Actually,
agreed.
Martin said in an interview one of the he wishes the show did differently was having more horses, but he understands how expensive they are.
The Blu-ray DVD.
The scene with Pod and that horse, and the horse going around Brienne and him shuffling and then him almost falling off at the end. Those are incredibly difficult shots to take. It is hard to get a horse to do all that.
Mm-hmm.
And they went through great lengths to put that out there.
If I could just kind of throw an overarching thing onto that, yeah, I think clearly it's a gender bender thing, where he's doing the feminine things and he's not good at it. But yet he shows her that he has been a warrior by killing the person he was trying to kill, Tyrion. That Maester Payne asked to those horses, that's a great thought. And if I could say this, I think Podrick, riding in on a horse is a symbol of power. I mean, Ned rides in his hand of the king, power. Tywin rides his horse up to the throne and has the horse crap in the hallway. It's a power thing. But also, I think the horses are an image of, especially Pod falling off. That, I think, is going to be mirrored when folks try to ride dragons.
And the reason she ultimately accepts Pod, other than the fact that she couldn't get her arm off, was that he killed somebody to save Tyrion, which I think could play in later.
I think it was that he held an oath.
True, that's true too. He faced a King Guardsman. That's a good point.
I think that's about it. But
Any other thoughts?
I think that anybody who isn't even a hunter would know that you're supposed to skin them before you cook them.
I'd have cooked it with its skin in there.
I would not have eaten it. I would have looked at it and
Rookie mistakes.
starved.
Rookie mistakes.
I don't.
Tastes better burnt, okay?
No,
Actually, probably as soon as I smelt that crispy hair, I'd probably be like, no, we're skinning it.
yeah, it's hear that with the plucking of the feathers with Gilly, taking all the feathers off the birds while she's talking to Sam. Everybody knows you got to take the exterior out. Plus, there are very few animals you cook with their heads on. It's just
Literally, barely any.
Barely.
Barely any.
All right, what's next?
So there's 2 more major scenes left in this episode, but I think the first one we should address, since it is the one of the most prominent ones, is obviously the events at the Vale.
Okay.
So Lord Baelish, of course, arrives with Sansa at the Vale of Arryn. At the Bloody Gate, I think this was Sir Donal Waynwood, that Sansa's name is actually Elaine. He basically hides Sansa as his niece, which is a small change from the books, because I think it was his daughter in the books, correct?
I think.
it is his daughter.
Yeah, because in the show she becomes Elaine Stone, his niece.
Is it his bastard daughter?
Yeah.
Bastard daughter.
In the books it's his illegitimate daughter as well. Yeah, and here it's just a niece. So he doesn't even dye her hair. There's no the only masking he does is really to have her put her cloak over her head to hide her hair color. So they then arrive at the top of the Eyrie with Lady Lysa Arryn and her son Robin. Lysa is, of course, aware of Sansa's true identity, and he has Robin show her to her chambers. And when they have gone, we then have Lysa express her desire to marry Peter that very day, and speaks of what she has done for him in the past, which includes, big shocker, the fact that she poisoned her husband, Lord John Arryn. And she starts blabbering away, but I think for once in the whole series, we actually get Peter Baelish show us, the viewers, his true emotions, which is pretty rare, because usually he's quite subtle and clever about what he's thinking. But here, he basically just went in and kissed her to shut her up for a change. And he agrees to marry her then and there. Well, he says he wants to change out of his clothing first, but she already has a scepter, or a scepter, or was it a maester?
It was
A septon ready to marry them, and she declares that she's gonna scream so loud that all of Westeros is gonna hear her. And I think she kept her word in this situation. And poor Sansa, I think, had this look on her face while we get the echo of Lysa's screams. And I kind of imagine Sansa thinking, did I make the right decision by coming here, or should I have stayed at King's Landing? That's the kind of thing I can imagine her thinking in her head, but obviously that's not the case probably. Eventually later on, Lysa and Sansa meet, and they talk about Catelyn, and we kind of find out how Peter loved Catelyn. Their conversation kind of grows tense. Lysa accuses Sansa of having seduced Peter Baelish, but she's eventually convinced by Sansa that she's of course a virgin, as we all know, and Lysa tells Sansa that once Tyrion has been executed, she will be marrying Robin and thereby becoming the Lady of the Vale, which is quite an awesome title, and in a way it gives Sansa quite an amount of power in some respects. I know I skipped over some of the smaller details in the scene, like the dialogue about how Catelyn loved cakes when she was living at River Run and all that. But there is one thing I just want to bring up before we go into discussing this whole scene, or hearing from you guys, is a comment that Lysa makes. Now, we all know that Lysa Tully is clearly not the sanest person. I think it was either you, James, or LaDonna who brought up the fact that she's been driven mad by the things that she's done for Peter all this time in your last video, and I completely agree with that point, 100%. But there's one thing she mentions about Sansa's dead uncle, of course, Brandon Stark. She mentions that he was handsome, arrogant, and cruel. Now, and that Catelyn, of course, loved him for whatever reason. Now, we know that through a number of events that he was handsome, and he was arrogant. He was a great fighter.
Yeah.
But I don't think we ever get any mention of him being cruel, which is quite interesting because we usually think of the Starks as these very good, noble, loyal, so on and so forth, all these positive qualities type people. So that was very interesting from when I read that. We know that he's a very wild person, or he was a very wild person in the past. I think he was described as the wild wolf in his younger days, when he was alive, that is. But I was shocked to hear her call him cruel. And I know she was probably referring to what he did to Peter Baelish when they had a duel for Catelyn or whatever, but something, I don't know, maybe I'm just holding on to something, but I somehow feel that there's maybe something more to Brandon Stark, and maybe she's right about him being cruel. I don't know what you guys think.
You have a strong possible point. If I can add one thing to that, we know that
Go for it.
Ned Stark told Brandon that he had a crush. Ned said to Brandon, I've got a crush on Ashara Dane.
Yes.
Brandon said, I'll go work it out, and then Brandon ended up sleeping with Ashara Dane.
As far as we can assume, yeah. And that's what I wanted to bring up because, I have posited the theory that Ashara Dane plus Ned equals Jon Snow, but I think in this case, this scene definitely could hint indirectly to the opposite of that, assuming, of course, that Brandon went and slept with Ashara Dane and got her pregnant with a child, which would, mean that there is grounds for Lysa to call him a cruel person, considering he went and did the dirty with the girl that Ned Stark had a crush on. So I will give that to you.
I say we let Payne go first on this one.
Go for it, Maester Payne.
Okay, what do I got here?
I'll be right back, folks.
Yeah, just go ahead. No, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna start. I have a lot about the Vale.
All right, I'll just knock a couple of things out.
I want to see him fly and everything like that.
Yeah.
That was huge.
When they first got there, Robin mentions that didn't the Lannisters kill your mother and chop off your brother's head? Doesn't mention Ned. He was never told about Ned, first of all. Sansa has to fill that in for him, and my brother too, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Good point.
No, he's right, yeah.
Littlefinger to Liza tells her, only speaking of it can make it real. Now, I'm thinking, putting it to one of my own theories too, I like that to Catelyn actually reading that letter that Littlefinger sent her. I think she did, and she's just never spoken about it. Unless you guys know that in her head she's said that she never read it to herself. I know to other people she said it, but I don't know if she said it to herself in her head.
Not that I can
like that line for that.
Especially since in the same... Sorry, go ahead.
And after Liza's telling her all this stuff when she's hugging her and her eyes are closed, and then she says, and then you can have the Vale, Sansa's eyes open. I think this is the moment where Sansa starts to really play the game.
Oh,
her eyes are closed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
She sees opportunity. I got you. Yeah.
And I think this is one of the big debates that, James and I and LaDonna, and I'm assuming you, Eli, and Maester Payne, about the manipulative nature of Sansa. See, I always interpreted her as really becoming manipulative when she's in the Vale. I know, James, you have a theory about her role at the Purple Wedding and all that, but I'd be inclined to agree with Maester on this one.
Yeah, I have something about that, but I'll save mine because mine's a big theory, and I'll save mine for the Bran Hodor scene.
I want to clarify that to me, the manipulation really only starts being a part of the game in the Eyrie. I agree with y'all on that. Her manipulation in King's Landing with the if she killed Joffrey was more of a wishful freaking thinking. She had no idea what was and then any other manipulation is just her playing the game. And the only reason we know that she is at all is because of her chapters in the book, but her talking to Tyrion in the show.
Oh, okay.
I also think the Vale, and I could be way off in this, but I think it's a symbol of women's fertility in general. The whole structure of it. You got the front is impregnable. It does have a specific shape in the valley. There's the Bloody Gate. You have the Moon Door. There's
Oh,
all sorts of things.
Maester Payne, you have got some good points.
Love it.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I never thought about that as it does kind of look like the symbolism of the chalice and everything like that. Yeah, that's
You get to the Vale, and this is crude, I know, but
When winter comes, you have to exit
You have to
the
pass through the bloody gate.
Mhm.
And
hey, Maester Payne. Not only that's a great point, and I missed it. You are brilliant. How about the fact that they call it the Moon Door, which is like moon blood?
exactly, yeah, the moon door.
Or
Yeah.
also the fact in winter they have to leave the top of the Eyrie because it is barren. You cannot live there anymore. You have to leave that part of the Vale
Awesome.
anyway.
I like that.
No longer fertile. I don't know.
Can I pop in quickly?
Go for it.
Maester Payne, that is brilliant, and I'm going to go back and analyze. I'm going to pick out more stuff like
Just read Catelyn's ascension up to it.
yeah. I wanted to mention, if I could go back briefly to Charlie talking about Brandon Stark being handsome, arrogant, and cruel.
Before you do that, can I add something that Maester Payne said?
Go for it.
At around the same time that Catelyn's climbing the mountain, she also is thinking, I could have one more child for Ned. And when she gets to that precipice, she starts getting really scared before she gets to the top. Random thought.
No, good image. I like that.
Good.
LaDonna, you got something to say?
That thing where she said, where Liza says that Catelyn was in love with Brandon, and that he was handsome, arrogant, and cruel. I thought that was interesting, folks, because throughout the book, we get the impression that Cat is not just pledged to marry him, but that she kind of really dug him. I mean,
I actually had that in my notes.
Nice.
yeah, where she really kind of dug him, and she was kind of disappointed in Ned because he wasn't like that. But I think it's interesting if we, I do think the cruelty thing had something to do with him slicing Littlefinger, but I also think it might be some kind of parallel to Sansa starting to think, well, my mother liked somebody who was cruel. And the only other time I can really remember the word cruel used is when Sansa remembers the unkiss and says that he pressed his cruel mouth upon me, which was a perspective of a teenager who wasn't quite ready for sexual relations, where somebody kind of pressing yourself on you for intercourse would be construed as something violent as opposed to just passionate. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I also like the fact that they said that Catelyn was getting fat, which is BS. That was not happening in the books. But Liza was fat when they got to the Vale. Remember, she's kind of pudgy. So,
Right.
Of course, this actress is as thin as she can be. But
Well, do you think they might have used those lines to play on that irony in this scene?
yeah, and another, I'll say this and I'll let y'all talk. You know, Liza's crazy, but she's right. She's right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's not stupid. She knows that Littlefinger has an obsession with Cat, and she knows that Sansa looks almost just like Cat. She's right to ask that about the lemons.
Although, LaDonna, I was curious about one thing, though. I mean, you know, we've all kind of discussed or debated the idea as to whether or not Littlefinger has pedophilic tendencies, if I can put it any other way. But Liza was really, really intrigued, or was really, really questioning Sansa about the idea that he was hooking up with the prostitutes or the whores at the brothel that he works at or that he owned.
We never saw anything to indicate he ever touched any of those girls. And
Precisely.
And even Roz said he's not.
Say it again, Mama.
Remember, even his prostitute Roz said, he doesn't touch me. He's not interested in us. They're a commodity. I don't know if he's a pedophile. I think he got locked into an image of Catelyn when she was about 13. That's all I'm saying.
So he's just obsessed with this one person in the state of a younger woman.
Exactly.
Yeah, when I did present that theory, I didn't mean that he like actively sought out little children, but his ideal bride is a 13-year-old cat.
Exactly.
Agreed.
There's
And
also the argument, though, that like John Arryn married Liza, who's younger than Cat. Like, he's much older. They're in this world. They're of age at that point. So Littlefinger's pedophile now in our time for sure. Back then, things are grayer.
That's true. And also, Littlefinger grew up a little bit with these young girls, and they were playing with him. You know, there were some, even in the books, there were some kisses going on, and I think Littlefinger just got hooked. It's like if you've ever, it's Arrested Development. That's what it is. He got stuck in that time zone with that woman.
She's never seen the show. I know y'all are thinking she's talking about the show. She's not thinking about the show.
I've never seen the show either.
I've never seen the show.
It's awesome. Y'all should watch it.
Shout out to Arrested Development, folks.
If I can bring up a couple of things, when Lysa starts, by the way, I thought this scene was well written, and I thought it was well directed, and I thought the actresses nailed this. When Lysa goes from being super nice into her bizarreness, and she's gripping Sansa, did you see Sansa turn wolfy for a minute?
I thought she was just really, really afraid. I didn't.
Oh, she got mad as hell for about 1 second. I thought she was going to jump and tear her throat out, and then she pulled back.
I didn't see that.
It was right when she said, "You are hurting me," and then she pulled.
I missed it.
I do remember her getting a grittier tone when she said, "You are hurting me."
Watch her face. It almost looks like the face right before she pushed Joffrey off that turret. She gets this.
Check it out.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to mention is, and this plays into my theory, is when Sansa says, well, first of all, she saves herself by reverting to a childlike person to get Lysa's maternal instincts to kick in and then she hugs her. But this plays into my theory. When she says, "I'm a virgin, I'm not pregnant," well, she's not going to be a virgin, and she's going to be pregnant later, in my opinion. So that's my theory.
So is every female that survives, pretty much.
Yeah, but we're vested with Sansa.
I know.
And she has the dream, James, about puppies in her lap.
I just want to add two tiny little things. Number one, I think Sansa, the actress, I agree with Mom that this was beautifully well done. I think the intricacies of the relationship between Littlefinger and Robin, I want to see more of, because I'm not sure what that is. Because they obviously know each other. It isn't just some long-term thing. I think he's his father, if I'm being honest. I think Littlefinger is Robin's father.
James.
They've been married for so long, it seems to me a rarity for there to only be one kid. And I think that, I don't know.
I agree.
Can I touch on that point you just brought up?
Yeah.
It would be interesting if that were the case, but it would be also even more messed up, because don't we have Littlefinger more or less admitting to the fact that he's willing to, if this is the case, kill his own son in order to cement Sansa's place and I guess power in the Vale by marrying her off to some other lord's son?
Agreed.
If indeed he is his son, of course. And also I could see them going about that way, because Robin, I mean, he is very, I don't want to say, he has a genetic link to Littlefinger because he is physically weak and all these things, but do you think maybe Littlefinger wants to reject, or like in his mind reject Robin because of these physical or mental weaknesses that he sees in his potential son or supposed son?
To me, there's no interest in Littlefinger's mind at all. Littlefinger cares not for anything but having things for himself. I described Littlefinger to my mom as he wants what he does not have.
Well, I don't know if LaDonna brought this up when I was gone for a split second, but I mean, it's interesting how the character or the relationship between Littlefinger and Robin is different in the show than we lost Eli. How the relationship between Robin and Littlefinger is different in the show from the books, because, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but from what I recall, wasn't Robin and Littlefinger more distant or separate, or at least they didn't have that same connection as they do in the TV show, apparently?
Yeah. I do not. Hi, Eli.
Sorry, I had to reset it because my mic. Sorry.
No worries.
I do not think that he is Littlefinger's child.
I could see them going either way with this, but
yeah. And if I can remind you all, first of all, Lysa had an abortion because of her father, Hoster Tully, forced it. Then she had 3 miscarriages and 2 stillborn full-term children. So I tend to think that they were John Arryn's children, and I'm not sure that Robin is. Well, let me ask you all this. Do you think that Robin is being poisoned by Littlefinger, and that's why he acts like that?
No, can I throw in one thing real quick? I think that's why she is still breastfeeding him, is because she's lost all of her other children. She won't let him get away.
She's paranoid of losing him.
Yeah.
And I think we're meant to be set up at the end so that Robin is similar to Sansa in that we think Sansa is weak and gullible, and that it turns out she's not that way. And I think we're meant to do the same thing with Robin, that at the end we're meant to go, sometimes the mama's boy turns into an okay adult. Sometimes you end up with a strong person.
I'll agree with you on that one. Wouldn't it be ironic if Robin turns out to grow up in the series and actually end up as Lord of the Vale in full, not just in title, but also in spirit and action? I mean, it would be quite interesting if he turned out to be a great leader in the end.
And that goes to what Cersei said, because the mine's not popping up full screen. And maybe it doesn't do that. That goes to what Cersei said to Tyrion. You know, she said, you know, Joffrey was dark when he was young. He turned bad later. You never, and she basically says you never know with your own children what's going to happen. But I think he does survive.
To add to Cersei saying stuff, just to keep it on the, I'd like to add, by the way, speaking of this scene being so well acted and directed and done, the scene where, or the line where Sansa says, he loved the Tully family, and she says, you wanted to say Catelyn. I know you wanted. Sansa played that line perfectly. It was perfect, the perfect little gap so that it worked. But to
small
play,
little pods.
yeah, just long. But to play on what you said, Mom, about what Cersei said in this episode, Cersei says, everywhere in the world they hurt little girls. Sansa, everywhere she goes, she's in another position where people are manipulating her and hurting her. I bet to the viewer they think for a split second Sansa's gonna be okay. And, yeah.
I'm a little bit, I don't want to go off track here, but I'm a little bit concerned as to how they're going to deal with the Sansa, Lysa, for however long that lasts, and Littlefinger dynamic. I mean, they're catching up to the books, like I mentioned not long ago, and I'm wondering what they're going to do once Lysa gets thrown out of the moon, or out of the door, or whatever that hole in the Eyrie.
Unfortunately, I hope they don't. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, it's just the moon door.
Oh, yes.
Moon door,
Sorry.
okay, that's what it was.
Yeah, I hope this is not the way they go, but I have a bad feeling that they're going to go the route of Blackfish and just disappear for a while until they're needed again for the narrative.
I don't think they can, Eli, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think we need to see Sansa's evolution, and you know, like when she goes into the snow and builds the Winterfell castle and all that. I think they need that so we see her realizing she is stronger in the north, and she's getting stronger the closer she gets to home.
I hope so.
That to me is all next season. The last time we see Sansa this season, in my opinion, will be when Lady Lysa gets killed.
Agreed.
I think we're gonna have that. The viewers are supposed to kind of assume she's safe enough to not see for a while.
Right.
You know.
That kind of fits in this episode. You know, everybody has a more or less conclusion going on, or there's conclusions being developed with each character. I cannot.
Definitely.
Do you guys want to keep talking about events at the Vale, or do you guys want to move on?
I'm good.
And did Payne have anything else? He said he had a lot written down about the Vale.
Oh yeah, Payne. I want to hear from you.
No, I think I covered it all there. Yeah.
I'm trying to stay out of it for a bit because I'm going to have to run on a little bit when we get to Bran and Hodor.
No worries. So shall I bring up Bran and Hodor and company's scene?
Let's do it.
Is that what's there?
That's the last one.
All right.
So, I guess the scene beyond the wall opens with Locke scouting Craster's keep and witnesses Rast beating one of Craster's former wives. He sneaks around inside the encampment. He sees Bran and his group held captive in a small hut. Then Locke returns to the group led by Jon Snow, and he tells them that they should strike soon, and because the mutineers are drunk, and I think he mentions there's only 11 of them or so. He does not, however, what was that?
No, sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I told my dog sit. I apologize.
Okay, no worries.
Like, what'd you tell me?
What'd you call me? Yeah, he tells them that they should strike the camp soon, but he does not inform Jon Snow that his brother is there, or the whole group is there.
He actually tells them that there's a hut they should avoid because there are dogs in it.
The
and
dogs,
he's talking
right.
about the one with Bran in it. Yeah.
Oh. I thought he was referring to the direwolves in that scene, but I guess that's true.
It was the hut with the girl with the
Bran, yeah. So Jon informs his group that they're going to attack at sundown. Later on, we have Carl, who enters the hut with Mira, and he attempts to rape her. But after a warning from Jojen that he can predict the future and he can help Carl in whatever way, shape, or form, the hut gets attacked by Jon's group. A battle ensues in which a bunch of the mutineers are killed. Locke slips away from the fight to go find Bran and his friends. He cuts Bran's knee, or he cuts Bran's ties, I guess, to get time back, and he also cuts his leg to see if he's actually Bran Stark. Picks him up to take him elsewhere, but then Bran, of course, wargs into Hodor, and Hodor, does what Hodor does and kills Locke by snapping his neck. And I just want to say I knew they were going to kill off Locke this season. I thought it would be a bit later, but I'm happy they did it now, and I think it was perfect. Even though Bran really wanted to see Jon, Jojen convinces Bran that Jon will try to take him back to the Wall and prevent Bran from fulfilling his duty or his destiny by going north. So the group resolves to depart the encampment unseen. Jon then enters the keep where Carl is. He fights him. And even though Jon is injured, one of the Craster's former wives kills Carl, or stabs him. I forget who kills him. Was it Jon or was it the wife? Somebody stabs him from behind. Jon
stabs him from behind, yeah.
Okay, but at that point it was one of the wives who distracts him long enough for Jon to do that.
Stabs him in the back.
Right. Then they're counting the dead. Ed, I think what's the guy's name? Ed, that character? I forget. Anyway, he notices that Rast is missing. Rast basically fled through the woods, but he's killed by Ghost, Jon's direwolf, and then Ghost returns to Jon, and Jon asks Craster's wives to come to the Wall, but they decline his offer. The group burns Craster's keep and the bodies of the dead. And I've got to say, and I wish I had brought this up in the scene with Daenerys, but I mean, we've been talking a lot about the lack of dragons, and I raised this point in my own video about, and I think you guys actually, I owe James and LaDonna this to a large degree, this notion that the presence or absence of their mythical creatures more or less is representative of each character's, or each of these significant characters' own emotional state, or to what degree they're being true to themselves, I guess. We have Jon, I guess, fulfill a mission, so to speak, and end the lives of 3 major opponents, and we have him and Ghost together, which I guess symbolizes Jon's own well-being and him being protected. Meanwhile, earlier in the episode, we have Daenerys not with her dragons. We just hear of the dragons being discussed by Daenerys and Jorah. We don't see them, and this discussion obviously emphasizes that Daenerys is in a bit of a tight position because 2 of the slavers' cities have been retaken, or they've been claimed by people that Daenerys doesn't really want to have in power there. And that, of course, in my mind, emphasizes Daenerys' own state of disarray, or her own emotional detachment from herself and her own well-being in general, if that made any sense. So that was my immediate thought on that scene. I think I had a few more, but I want to hear from you guys first, so I will let you guys... Oh, can I say one last thing? Quick last thought. We mentioned this before we started filming this discussion. James, I know you posited a theory about, and LaDonna, a theory that Carl was a warg. And to a degree I could still see them going with this, but I'm starting to have a few doubts about that, considering the idea that Carl is one of the top paid cutthroats at Flea Bottom is reaffirmed, and we don't really have any wargs, as far as I'm aware, that far south. We also have Carl dying and not seeming to be aware of the site, quote unquote, the site that Jojen has, or his ability, and he almost doesn't even seem to believe him, which kind of has me thinking that maybe Carl isn't even aware of these mythical elements to the world of Westeros. So go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
If any of the people watching remember, I posited that Carl may be ultimately cold hands, and even the night. I'd like to go ahead and say that I'm pretty sure, and I don't know, I've not found it anywhere. If whatever that is that we're referring to that is the Night King in the previous episode, I'm pretty sure that's Burn Gorman playing that role. He's in These obviously somebody's put in makeup, but I'm pretty sure it's Burn Gorman. The facial structure looks the same, but it's a different character. So I definitely think they're leaving Cold Hands out. I definitely think I'm wrong about Carl being Cold Hands. The Carl being a warg, though, I'm not sure, because they could, and I agree, it seems convoluted and something we're not meant to understand if it is going on. But obviously they've left out Varamir. I'm pretty sure they've left out Varamir. If they've left out Varamir, warging somebody else's mind is going to be a huge deal at the end of this, human to human, and maybe even transferring mind once you die. Well, when Rast and Carl are taking over Craster's Keep in that battle, undeniably it looks like warging. It could completely not be, and it would be justifiable if I'm wrong. But in the scene now we get in this episode where Carl Clubfoot is stabbed by the girl, and then when he turns around, he's stabbed in the back of the head. The girl makes a very strange face, and it arguably could easily be that is just her reaction to the situation. But she also is the only one I saw crying when Craster keeps burning, which has nothing to do with what I'm saying, but it seemed as if she was the only one crying when Craster keeps burning. If she is indeed warged by Carl, here's what we get out of it. Number one, it shows that you could warg into somebody else. It shows that there are other wargs. He doesn't need to have the green seeing, because we've already established that that's a different thing with Bran and Jojen, that's different from warging. Jojen can't warg, but he can green see. It also establishes that this capability is national, that it's possible to have it down south, which needs to exist because Bloodraven is arguably a warg. We need to at least be thinking about it. And if that girl has been warged, then it is a mirroring of Varamir, and we get the idea that you can transfer into another person's body. To me, it is an amalgam of a lot of information we may need. I'll invite Charlie back. It's an amalgamation of a lot of information we may need later that we haven't gotten yet. Already joined. Sweet.
My only problem with that is that they made a point early to show when, I forget his name, whoever had the eagle, they showed his eyes change when he did warg, not green sea.
Right.
And the eyes never changed in Carl. That would be my only argument.
Good point. I'd say that if his eyes did change, it would be giving it away, and I think we're ultimately going to see the Night's King being able to warg without moving his eyes. I don't know.
To add on Eli's comment, if I may, I don't know if anybody mentioned that when I got disconnected, but I also was wondering why Jojen potentially didn't bring up the idea that potentially Carl could warg. I mean, Jojen has green seeing, and maybe he wasn't able to see Carl's future, but he seemed pretty convinced that Carl was going to die that night.
Yeah.
And at least my hunch is that maybe Jojen would know or have some kind of insight towards thinking that maybe Carl would survive if he is a warg. Not discounting the idea that he's not a warg, but that was just my slight
I agree. I agree.
Apprehension of that theory.
Have a conclusion on it. I am just yeah. If I can expand upon a couple of other things in this scene.
LaDonna, do you want to respond first? Payne.
Go for it.
LaDonna, then Payne. Oh, Payne, go first then. So much confusion.
Sorry, I missed where we were. I was preparing in my head.
LaDonna, do you want to finish your thought then?
Yeah, because this is my thought, James. I was quiet. Now you need to not interrupt me, okay, for just a second. When that girl turned around after Jon stabbed him, I thought that was a very odd look. And I really am not quite sure he didn't warg into her. It was a very Exorcist kind of look to me. And I want to say another thing. She ended up, of course, leaving with those women at the end, and I think we need to watch what happens to those women as they go. I'm going to say this. I think James is right. His name is Carl Tanner, by the way. I think Carl is played by Burn Gorman. If you look at his face, I swear to God, it's the Night's King. You go back and look at it. I don't think I'm making a big stretch here. And I'm going to tell you, when Jojen's hand goes up in flames, and he says, "I see you burning and then covered with snow," I think that's the end game with the Night's King.
I want to clarify that when I say that the Night's King looks like Burn Gorman, I don't mean any connection between the character Carl Clubfoot and Night's King. Only that the actor is playing both roles.
It doesn't matter, I don't think. But I do think when they cast Burn Gorman, he was super excited about it, and I think he has a huge role in this to play. And I do think it looks just like Carl Tanner if you look at him and try to take that makeup off. It's almost got the same nose and everything. But I think that you mentioned this, Charlie, in the very beginning of this particular episode tidbit. I think the hand burning, I mean, obviously we see him burn and covered with snow. I think it has another meaning later.
Well, he doesn't say that at that. I'm interrupting Maester Payne, but just so I can get this out of the way, Jojen, when you see the burning hand, has nothing to do with Burn Gorman, in my opinion. It's not even in the scene with Carl. His hand is. He says, "This isn't the end. The end has not happened yet." And Mira says, "Well, when will we know if it's the end?" And then it shows his burning hand, and he says, "You'll know." That, to me, that has nothing to do with Burn Gorman, in my opinion. That is huge, and I have no idea what it means.
If I can add one more thing, James, and I don't know if it means that or not. This was said by somebody else. You know, when he sees that vision behind Bran at the tree, and there's a whole lot of light coming up, whether it's sunrise or not, is that the bit? I'm going to light the biggest fire the North has ever seen. Is that
I heard that too. Yeah.
Maester Payne?
Oh, I was just agreeing with LaDonna. I had heard somebody mention that about whether or not the Mance Raider and stuff are going to focus in on Craster's Keep when it's burning because of the big fire, or the guys on the other side of the wall.
I didn't see it that way. I saw it more as something farther in the future, like that weirwood may be important to Lightbringer, whoever or whatever that is.
So, Maester Payne, I think you were going to make a couple other points. Looked like you were.
No, I thought LaDonna was referring to something that I had heard somebody say. Okay. I covered that.
Well, you did say earlier, before we started the video, something about this.
You got it?
Hey, can I stop y'all for something? Eli, are you listening?
Mom, I got a picture up that
he's got a video. Hold on, 1 sec.
See that?
No. I can see it on the small screen, but not the big one.
I saw the big screen first.
Everyone has to be quiet.
Booyah. There you go.
Yes. Okay. So that's. Can I talk, or should I wait?
You can talk. It'll just stay up there while you're talking.
Okay. Okay. So to me, that's an image of Bran. Of course, you got the werewood. That's Bran on the Green Seer throne. You got all the roots behind him, stuck to him. You see it a bit. When I first noticed it, he was just sitting in the cell before the vision or anything, and you see him a lot clearer. They could be branches, they could be roots, but I think that's what the image is representing, is Bran on the Green Seer throne. So I kind of like that as to them looking to where we're headed. So that's my only point there.
Hey, that's a good point, and it kind of looks like enlightenment.
I kind of see it as Bran being trapped to the werewoods.
Chained.
As if he's kind of chained to him. I don't think it's maybe the Green Seer, but maybe kind of into the line they said about don't go too far in or you'll become that.
Good point. And what about the werewolves? That's a good point.
With the wolves, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where don't stay for too long or you'll become it. And that's the Green Seer and the werewood. You stay in there too long.
Eli, while you're talking, you made a really great comment on the last video, I think. Will you mention that thing about Alisane's tears at the Vale?
Alyssa's tears. I think that is a mirroring of Catelyn's story, because the story is all of her family, her children, her brothers, and her, maybe not her brothers, but her children, her husband, were all killed, and she never wept. And therefore she was cursed to weep forever. And I thought that could be the direct contrast, because it ends the story with, and Catelyn could feel the mist from the waterfall on her face.
Good
And
point.
I think that is a... Oh, sorry.
I was just trying to.
No,
hold
I was just leading into what she was saying, though.
Okay.
Yeah, but Eli, if you could continue on that thought, because what is it, Alyssa's tears? She
Yeah.
cried, and that she didn't cry when any of her children died in front of her, and neither did really Kat. She tried to hold it together. And also that waterfall with the tears that fall, none of them ever make it to the bottom.
Exactly.
That means something. I'm not sure what it means, but I did love your comment.
Yeah, I thought it may have been like Catelyn never being able to actually kill or act to save her children in life, and now she won't stop until they're all dead. And now she's kind of been cursed as this, being, Lady Stoneheart, we all know. But, like even with Brienne, like arguably she didn't get killed, but, she's willing to kill people she would have never even thought of killing before.
Agreed.
But yeah, read that little story, and the way that it explains right when the story ends just how the mist touched her face. But that, yeah, I appreciate the shout out for the comment, because I missed last week. I was devastated.
Yeah. If I can add like 3 things to to me, it was awesome that we got Jojen's Green Dream, because we don't get that in the book. It's impossible for us to, since we don't have his perspective. The potential rape of Mira, a character we have been engaged in, to me is complete foreshadowing. To me, one of the reasons why Jojen's burning hand has nothing to do with Burn Gorman is that we already had the scene where Jojen tells Burn Gorman tells Carl, "I've seen you burn in the flames and the snow fall upon you." That was enough for us later to realize that Jojen's predictions are at least partially true. His dreams are at least partially accurate. We didn't need the fire, and we certainly didn't see Burn Gorman's hand burning. I think the burning has to do with the Night's King's mind. I know I'm out there, but to me it has to do with that. I think we were all a little worried about what they were doing with Bran getting diverted and Jon going to Craster's Keep. I think it turned out pretty damn well. It was timed well, obviously. That was the intent of it. But Bran had to make a choice. And Bran got to see Jon one last time. And I think Jon, since based on the story they've given us, Jon would have taken Bran back. He would have forced Bran to come back, and Bran's paraplegic. He wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. I also I think we all generally predicted that Hodor was going to get warged this episode, and they needed to set that up because they didn't really set up Bran being able to move Hodor around consciously. I think they nailed it. I loved Hodor having to deal with what he had done and looking at his blood on his hands and genuinely feeling as if he had no ability to control himself, because he wasn't, but doing something horrible. And I loved Ghost and Jon's reunion. I'm sure the viewers loved the heck out of it, and we certainly didn't see it coming. Still not sure how you catch Ghost, but and I loved the Craster's women. I loved Craster's women being like,
yeah,
agreed.
I really loved what they basically said. The crone, maiden mother crone. I loved it when she said, basically, you guys have screwed us forever. We had Craster, then the Night's Watch, they screw us. Do you really think we're going to deal with men anymore? They said, screw it, we're going to go off. I think they end up going to that island and forming.
Skagos.
Yeah, but I wanted to say there's a plot problem in this. Did y'all catch it?
no, Mom.
Shoot it.
It deals with Locke. Because what the hell was he going to do? First of all, he had to get Bran back to... He could have...
I told you this. I'm the one who told you this. I just want to clarify that.
Okay, fine. I brought it now.
I know,
Let's hear it, LaDonna.
But the plot hole is that, Roose Bolton would not believe that Bran was dead, because we already had that problem before where he thought Bran and Rickon were dead, and Ramsay pulled it out of Theon that they weren't. Roose Bolton would never have believed that Bran was dead if Locke killed him immediately, which he could have done. He had to get Bran back. So how in the world was Locke going to get Bran through the wall?
His head?
How is he going to get through the wall? How is Locke...
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know.
That was the only thing I would think, is that he could have just brought back his head.
Could have. Do you think Robb Stark's head's on Rhaegar?
Let's stick on this topic.
Before we get into that topic, I had one question actually about Carl in this scene, because he keeps mentioning Mira's hair. He mentioned this episode and in the last one. He talks about the texture, the color, how obsessed he is with it. Now, I don't know if this was just a throwaway line to show how creepy or evil the character is, but I was wondering, are they, assuming Carl does come back, if he comes back again in some form, does this act as some kind of foreshadowing to that?
My thought on it was that, because I saw a lot of people online asking, because I was curious on when he caught Jojen and what's his sister's name? I'm sorry.
Mira.
Jojen and Mira. The first thing he said was, "Oh, 3 highborns," and the first thing I thought was, okay, Bran makes sense. They don't look highborn in any way or shape or form. They're Crannig men. They don't look highborn, and that's the only way that. And I saw that complaint online a little bit. And I thought that the only reason could be that the hair, they're one of the few, only royals would wash their hair. That was kind of to explain why he knew they were highborn.
Maybe their speech, potentially? I don't know. They don't really make a distinction in the show.
That makes a good point, though. I'd never considered that. That could be it. I was just curious. I didn't know.
No, that's a good question. And I've never thought of it, honestly, so definitely a good point.
If
the same way that
Carl is a war,
hold on,
then it would be a good way for them to ease the viewer into it. If in the later scene with the Craster's wives, we get that girl saying, "I always liked curly hair." That would be a perfect way to get the viewer to drop the hint before it's later revealed.
That was the hint I was kind of going for.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
No, I'm glad you shelled it out or dished it out. Go ahead, LaDonna.
We also had a similar
theory you don't quite agree with.
I'm not sure yet. That's the thing. I'm undecided about this one.
Yeah.
Well, it's way out there, so we're just throwing things out. But, that was also basically said by Stannis when he met Gendry. He said half highborn, half lowborn. I don't know. Maybe they're intuiting it. Do you think this is the beginning of Jon really starting to do the warging with Ghost? They've been separated a long time for one reason or another.
I think this is maybe how he'll start to see the comfort in it that Bronn's found. But I don't think he'll take advantage of it the same way Bronn does.
Well, he fights it, but he's half tarred, so.
Something has to happen.
No, you're good. Go ahead. Sorry.
Something has to happen, I think, for that. Something really big or major, I think, is going to happen for us to have that warging occur. Here's a small theory. I don't know if this is, going to happen or not, but I could maybe see it when the wildlings attack from the south. If, Jon and what's her name, Ygritte are fighting. What happens if Jon accidentally wargs into Ghost and then kills her?
I don't know.
It'd be interesting.
I have a theory on that.
Go for it, LaDonna. I want to hear it.
I know who kills Ygritte.
Who?
Go on.
Do tell.
Jon does not kill Ygritte in the book, right? Somebody else arches her. We've been set up with somebody who's a really good archer who has a vendetta against Ygritte.
Yeah.
Guyman.
Who?
Guyman.
Yeah.
The little boy.
Oh, you're absolutely right. 100%.
Yeah.
Anything?
Agreed.
We're all agreed. It's a consensus.
If we all agree on anything.
Oh, absolutely. So do we have any other thoughts on this episode, or?
I have one more, and I'm not.
Yes, I have a huge theory, but yeah, go ahead.
LaDonna, then Eli.
This is very.
No,
This is very brief, and I did not. I am not the one who made this comment. Somebody else did online. I can't remember who, but somebody noted that this gradual rapey thing gets worse. Jamie's, and then we see all women getting raped and blah blah blah. This is when somebody said we feel like the tide is going to turn now, like Wheel of Time is now coming around, and we're not going to see that anymore. And it was like the directors and Martin were putting us in to make us so numb about it. After a while, it's like, God, come on, man, we don't want to see it anymore. I don't think we're going to see any more of that. I think it was the culmination of it just to make us realize how terrible it was. And now I think maybe the women are going to start coming to the forefront. I like that.
I got
Go for it, Maester.
Payne.
just on Jojen's vision that he talks about, not the one we see, but when he's talking to Carl, and he says, "I saw you die tonight. I saw you burn. I saw the snow fall and bury your bones." How do you think that plays out in his head? Do you think snow means Jon? Like the vision, like symbolically maybe, the snow falls. Like when you hear Melisandre say she looks for Azor Ahai and all she sees is snow, we assume it's Jon, right?
What you just said is actually ice and fire. I didn't think about it, but it is.
And Maester Payne, maybe you were away for a minute when I said it, but I think that burning of the hand and the fact that he says didn't just apply to this scene. I think it applies later to the Night's King.
Okay.
Okay, let me say, this is my big thing that I have to get out there. I had a guy commenting who has been dying to get this theory from me, and I finally got enough from last episode and this episode where it's starting to turn from theory to prediction. And that is, and I think it really played out with the Bran using Hodor. He killed the man and then dropped him, and Hodor looked at his hands and saw the blood on his hands. But Bran showed no remorse at all. He was already about himself, like, come here and help me, and he had to deal with it. And that kind of plays into my big story arc, because it happened with last week with the Night's King when we found out that how does he take over them? He kind of takes over their consciousness. When he takes over a baby, when they kind of change, they kind of become something else. They lose their sense of being. And I think that this is all playing into, I don't think warging is a good ability at all. I think that is a very evil thing to do, and I think that that's what the Night's King is doing, is truly warging someone forever. And that because, and it only plays in with Bran in this episode, because what I've thought about the Starks since the beginning, with the way that Martin has been playing with good guys becoming bad guys and the way you think of people, is the one reoccurring thing is the way people's childhoods play out always have a direct effect on how they are as adults. And that is, you know, you see it with the Hound being burned, you see it with Cersei and the prophecy, you see it with Littlefinger and his grudge. And I think, what is the one reoccurring thing that has happened to every Stark child that is alive? Horrible, horrible things from every direction, and everyone wants to kill them.
That's true.
What is the one? So I could see that becoming, I don't think in the end of this story that the Starks are good guys. In the kids, at least, that it ends with the kids, because I think the big play is A Song of Ice and Fire. I get that, and I think the only answer is balance, and that is why the last book is called The Dream of Spring, and that's why when I heard the R plus L equals J theory, I was like, that makes perfect sense, because but I think his end game is going to be, it's extremism on both ends. The Red God is not right, the others are not right, and I think Bronn will become the beacon of the others, and Dany will be the beacon of the Red God, and Jon will be spring, in a sense, or balance, and he will have to, due to Ned's own theory of you cast the judgment, you swing the sword, he will end up killing Dany and Bronn. Boom, there it is.
Interesting.
That's my big theory.
Very interesting. I missed a bit of it, but
I
the last part.
I agree. Definitely, warging probably is going to end up being a bad thing, and I think we kind of touched on it last week with the Night's King versus the Unsullied. I think it's slavery. It's mental slavery. That's why it's abomination, right? You're controlling somebody. You're against their will. So I
And
think
that's the reoccurring thing. That's beautiful. Slavery too. Perfect.
all yours. Anyone?
Yeah, I'm done. That was it.
I
That
think that was
oh,
a
by
nice.
the way, let me throw out his name. That was just for Josh Law, if you're watching. He said he was going to stay up till 7 in the morning to watch, so I hope to God he did.
Josh Law, that's his name.
Yeah, Josh Law. He was in the comments.
Shout out to you.
Because he thought that winter is coming was a threat rather than, like winter is coming, a foreboding thing. He thought it was an actual threat from the Starks, and I told him I couldn't comment because it got into my theory. I had to let him know.
Thank you, Eli.
I've said my piece. Do we have any questions that have been?
Got a couple.
Should we? Okay, go ahead.
I'll do. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say we could make our predictions for next week's episode, or we can do questions first. But you want to do predictions first?
Predictions first, yeah.
No real predictions. I just got to say I'm finally happy we are getting Yara Greyjoy arriving what looks to be the Dreadfort, and I'm really excited to see what's going to go on there and how they're going to deal with that whole plot issue, because things seem to be happening very differently in next episode than they do in the books, clearly. And I wonder if they're going to touch upon Balon Greyjoy's eventual death, maybe.
Well, Zong asked if anybody thinks Yara might replace Jane Poole as fake Arya in the TV series. I don't see that happening because I think Yara is extremely important in being she can't be turned, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't think that an Ironborn woman could fake being a lady like that.
Ouch.
Anybody got a theory that they want to?
I have no theories. I'm just
I don't think I've even seen the preview yet.
I was actually just in this episode, a little disappointed with myself at the Jojen scene with the hand burning, because I have such a feeling that means something greater, and I just rewatched it over and over, and I have no idea what that means.
You and me both, Eli. I think the same thing, but I don't know what yet.
Yeah.
I think Tyrion has his trial. It's the laws of God. It's a man.
That's right. That's going to happen next episode, I think.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Whole lot of comments. So
should we just read the questions, maybe?
There's a lot of them. So I'm just gonna do a couple of them.
Okay.
Does anybody think that they're gonna leave out the horns? And does anybody think that they're going to leave out Victarion and or Euron, because they've got the Myronese fleet now? Danny does.
They're all.
I say next season. We're going to learn more about the other Greyjoys next season, I suspect. Because you mentioned they didn't cast the actors, correct?
I cannot find anywhere where I saw that they had cast them. I saw an article that said they were cast, but now I'm finding those two people listed in theoretical casting. So
I swear to God, we saw they were cast, and it's like everything about them got taken down, just like they did with the Night's King thing.
Agreed.
I don't think. I kind of got the feeling that us book readers are kind of inadvertently being told that the horns are a lie by them being excluded from the show. I have no idea with the Greyjoys. I don't know on that front, but with the horns, I don't think they're going to come into play.
I do, because they're on the front of one of those books. I think they're important.
I guess is that exactly what that is? I didn't think about that. Possibly.
And we've heard those horns, not those horns, but we've heard horns, throughout this thing, the 3 blasts and things. I think they're very important.
Yeah, well, I just don't think we'll get all. How many? There's what? Oh no, I guess the one's just referenced. There's only 2 in the show, right? Or in the books, I mean.
There's one up north, which is the Horn of Joramun, and then Victarion and Euron. Do they have 1 or 2 horns?
They have 1, don't they? That they're traveling with.
I think the one north of the wall is going to get excluded. The one, whichever one is a fake, Because I think, now you mention it, it is on the front of the book. Yeah, there's a good chance it plays in. But I don't think that the other one that hasn't been mentioned yet will get brought in.
My own crackpot theory is Hodor will be the one to blow the horn of Joramun. Foreshadowed by Hodor.
That would be awesome.
I absolutely
Goes to the well.
agree.
That would be perfect because he only has one purpose, and that is the only thing he can say is the one thing he needs to say. That would be awesome. I never had considered that. That would be awesome. I've been thinking about Hodor too. Ever since LaDonna got me hooked on Hodor.
Go read him when he's at the well. Go read when he's at the well and watch his voice echo through the well.
Really?
Hodor. I remember that.
I need to look.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to read that.
Yeah.
I just want you to know, Eli, that there's a person on here, Sweetie FT, that agrees with you a whole lot, they say.
Oh, really?
I don't know if
I
that's
appreciate that.
theory you just said or what, but yeah.
Hey, it doesn't matter either way. I'm happy about it.
Claire Grace, Clement Drake, Kizzy, Jesse, Tony Teflon.
Oh, and that's one thing I was gonna throw in
Yay,
with my
Tony.
theory. I forgot to throw in was yeah, and Tony, yeah, I love your shit too. But I was gonna throw in, if you look at the map, it's on the map because the very north is called the Land of Always Winter, and Valyria is called the Land of Endless Summer. And because what is the one? Neither of those will work to keep a people alive.
True.
Always summer, always winter. You have to have spring, and that's why Song of Ice and Fire. I think that's the whole gist of it.
I want to say hi to Claire Gray. She and I have been talking, and who was the other guy? Kizzy or
Kizzy.
hello? And hey, Tony, love your stuff.
Check out the Don, Tony Teflon. He's got great stuff.
Let me throw out something about the Don right now. Hey, Don, Stannis doesn't stand a chance, bro. I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
Oh, I'm gonna get hate on the next video. But
Those are fighting words, dude. Those are
I
fighting
know
words.
it. I know it.
Shout out to both of them, Claire and Tony. Claire's been my loyal research assistant lately.
Oh man, I watch all of his videos nonstop.
I've seen them all.
And he has the greatest sign on and off ever.
Any other questions we should answer before we
Thank
get too sidetracked?
so much for that. That's legit. It looks like they were the majority were talking to each other. I don't see many question marks.
Oh, okay.
Left them, but there are a lot. So we will try to comment at least in writing on a lot of those.
Mm-hmm. Write your questions down. We'll respond.
Yeah, I respond to comments all week long. I love it.
Sorry, we're interrupting you, James. Go ahead,
No,
James.
We all do the same. We are all so interested in this that we try to comment back and forth. And you can find Charlie's and well, everybody's pages in the description below. Not quite yet, but you will have them once the video gets uploaded.
Awesome.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Maester Payne. Y'all rock.
Thank you all, you guys.
I have one thing. It's my mom's birthday today, so hi, Mom. I love you.
Shout out to Maester Payne's mama.
Thanks, guys.
Can we sing this song?
If you want to, if I can say one thing for those of you who have not seen it, James and I put a video up called Nemesis. Check it out.
Oh, I love it.
It's a great video, folks.
Yeah.
Before we go off, I also want to thank James and his mother, LaDonna. You guys are amazing. The best theories out there, I say, and especially thank you so much for organizing this group discussion, because without you guys, it would not be possible.
We do
Much appreciated.
2 hours every time, and I cannot. It goes by like that to me.
Likewise.
Oh, I know. I can't believe. I'm sure this ran for probably about 3 hours, but I didn't even notice. I had a blast. And
Maester Payne, I gotta say, you don't say as much as the rest of us, because the rest of us, especially me, but when you do, good God, man, you really don't think about. No, I did not.
Thank
As
you.
a matter of fact.
Is there a Varys on our council? It's there.
Very true.
I
Alrighty,
still got my
folks.
job.
He is called the Maester.
Charlie, you're always getting us
The Dell train.
stuff. And apparently, Eli, you got some fans out there listening. Thank y'all so much for joining
Hey,
us.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I had a blast. Everyone have a lovely day.
Two.
Easy. Bye, guys. Thank you very much.
And Charlie, thank you.
What's that?
And your theories are ridiculous. You get us thinking. I sincerely can't thank you, Charlie. And everybody needs to be visiting his. Whether you've read the books or not, you need to be visiting his. Actually, if you have not read the books, you should not be watching this. But you can go watch Charlie's.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
One time.
Thank you so much for the shout out, James. Always appreciate it.
Yeah, I
You
try
are
not
the
even.
best.
I try not even to comment on your videos, Charlie, because I can't comment without spoiling. So
It's all good, guys. Well, thanks again for organizing this, and I guess I will see you guys next week. So take care.
We will. Bye. All right. Love you, Mama.
I love you too. Good night, baby doll.